Good evening. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Armchair Admirals and Generals, a Star Citizen podcast. I am Tree0311 or Tree0311 for all my fellow grunts out there. My fellow hosts are, introduce yourselves, gentlemen.
I'll yield to my compatriot.
All right, fair enough. I'm Night Cobb. I'm represented by the sexy ship you see down there in the bottom left corner. Casual Twitch streamer. Been in the Navy 15 years as a submariner. Doing two types of submarines: Los Angeles fast attacks and then Ohio class guided missile submarines. And I apologize for the voice. Just getting over a thing, and no pain anymore in the throat, but it did a number. I sound pretty raspy, like I've been gargling razor blades, but it doesn't hurt to talk, so that's me.
Right on. Welcome. Thanks for joining me, Night Cop. Kel,
Thank you.
why don't you tell
Hey.
everybody, tell buddy, who you are?
Well, I am a Tirkel. I am a active duty Army soldier. Been in the Army for 21 years. You can find me at YouTube/Atirkel, and I do now have a Twitter account at Atira_Kel. First time for everything, and yeah, I've been an armor officer. I've been a military intelligence officer, and yeah, I've been on every level of Army staff or unit from the platoon to the Army theater command. So, with the exception of one level, the Corps. So, a lot of breadth there of unit size.
Yeah.
Nice.
And if this is your first time visiting my channel, listening to my stream, or seeing any of my content, again, I'm Trio311. I'm a former Infantry Marine, current civilian and Army National Guard flight paramedic, multiple deployments overseas to Iraq and Afghanistan. And the reason we are all here is because the three of us have all been on the Astropubs, or been on Paul Shelley's Astropub Captain's Table podcast, and that's where Atira Kell and I met. And after that, after that podcast, that episode, I was like, man, that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed hanging out with Kell and talking Star Citizen. I really appreciate what he had to say. And then shortly thereafter, Night Cobb was on the show as well, and I was like, man, that guy, he's had a lot of really interesting things to say. I really appreciated his perspective. And I got to thinking, I was like, how much fun would it be for all three of us to hang out and talk Star Citizen from our different military backgrounds, and do it in a way that is beneficial to military military personnel, veterans like us. And so, if this is your first time on my channel, this is a charity stream. In that every stream I do, all my content is geared towards charity. And if you look in the chat right now, you can see that we are raising money for an organization called StackUp.org, which helps connect military personnel and veterans with video games and video game communities, to help them deal with deployments, to help them deal with struggles with PTSD, all that sort of stuff. It's a great organization, and so that's why we're here. We're here to have fun, chat about Star Citizen, and hopefully raise a little money for a worthy cause. And that's where the the name Armchair Admirals and Generals came from, because we've got Navy personnel, we've got Army personnel, we've got Marines who are a little bit of both, and so it's been a lot of fun getting ready for this.
You belong to us, Marine.
Yeah, that was gutsy call there to say that. I feel like you.
I
Wow,
pound
that's a
ground.
dirty
I ride the
admission.
yeah. I pounded the ground. I've rode the boats.
There you go.
But
That's
we
fair.
we love everybody, and now I'm a filthy guardsman, doing the aviation thing. But yeah, so we've got an interesting episode tonight, and we're going to be doing these hopefully once a month, if well, hopefully more than once a month, but schedules permitting. And Kel and Night Cobb are my co-founders of this podcast, and so the goal is to have them on as frequently as possible. But of course, there is the the fact that we have IRL commitments, and so what you guys in the chat, watching now, watching later, can help out with is if you know of other military members, veterans in the Star Citizen community, and you think that it'd be fun to have them on the show and chat with them about Star Citizen, we would love to have them on. I am going to be creating additional scenes that way we can have multiple guests. Whether it's alongside the three of us, or if one of us can't make it, helping fill in the gaps, just to add a little bit of variety and help to grow this podcast, so that way we can bring in multiple perspectives. Because obviously, we're missing Air Force, we're missing Coast Guard.
I mean, are we missing the Coast Guard?
Ooh.
I'm trying to be
Ouch.
inclusive, Cal.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding.
I
I'm
love
giving
coasties.
I'm giving
I
just
love
Yeah,
coasties.
it's the coasties are like the Bremen Defense Force. They've got a role in Star
Yeah.
Citizen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've got some interesting topics for tonight. And again, if you're in chat, if you're hanging out with us live, feel free to drop some questions in the chat. We might not get to them instantly, but if you have questions related to the topics as we're going through them, please feel free to chime in and be a part of the conversation. But I say let's get on to it. Atira Kel, why don't you show off your beer mug, beer stein,
Oh,
and I'll
right.
show you mine.
Okay. All right, let's see. I gotta look in the right. So yeah, I got this in Prague, probably 15 years ago. First time I was stationed in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, tonight I'm drinking, I believe this Flying Dog, and it's an Imperial Porter.
Ooh,
So yeah,
that's a thick beer.
10,
It sounds like.
10%, baby.
We'll see how
Yeah.
long you last. Okay.
Yeah. When I'm done here, I go for the scotch. So if I vanish
There we
off
go.
the screen, it's because I'm going for a bottle.
Yeah. And then here is my mug. It's not a Stein, but it's a stone mug.
Oh
Ooh,
yeah,
I like that one.
yeah.
So one of my
Oh, that's solid.
one of my buddies from my old unit makes all sorts of cool swag with our emblem on it, and so I had to have it, and it holds 2 whole beers, so we're starting it off right. And whenever I stream about Star Citizen, I try to fill my mug with a beer with a space name, and I forgot to bring the can up here, but the brewery is called Ecliptic, like the ecliptic of a solar system, and I think that one's the Stardust IPA. I don't remember. Pretty good though. But yeah,
Nice.
so
I'll have
tonight,
to peruse the Maryland alcohol establishments and see if I can match your trend at some
there you
point.
go. Yeah, I always I try to keep like a 6-pack or a couple of beers with interesting sci-fi looking labels. Like another one that I enjoy, I think it's from a brewery out of Montana. It's like Moondog or something, and it's like a Dalmatian in a like a NASA spacesuit. That one's pretty good. But we're going to be talking from with part of it, our perspectives is going to come from a little bit of influence from our military background, our individual military backgrounds, and not only each from different services, but we're also dramatically substantially different jobs. But we're going to be starting off the show talking about ship roles, and then later on we'll be discussing bombers and bombing, given the advent of the Crusader Spirit A1. And then we're going to be wrapping up with a discussion on master modes, which we learned about from CitizenCon, and that definitely shook things up within the Star Citizen community. Maybe not as much as skills and skill points or whatever they're calling it, but it was definitely there was a lot of really interesting conversations surrounding that. So I think it should be pretty interesting. And we've been working really hard over the past month to get ready for this. We've been coming up with topics of discussion, questions to guide that discussion, and so we'll be using some of those, and then some notes, resources to study up on. But again, if you have something to say, if you have a question, we'd love to hear it. So let's get started. Starting with ship roles, um, Night Cobb. As far as ship roles and classes, what do you think their impact on travel and master modes is going to be?
Uh, one of the big things that they talked about with ship roles, is that whole ecosystem of bombers, medium fighters, heavy fighters. And one of the big things that I'm interested in, especially with Pyro coming online, is some of the other stats that they don't talk so much about with regards to things like speed, shields, and stuff like that. They talk about those, but what we haven't really got into conversations too much about is how do roles get determined by things, you know, maybe from a more esoteric standpoint, like fuel. Uh, the Warden is really, the Vanguard is a great example. Right now, it almost stands alone in terms of a heavy fighter with range. And that kind of role is going to make it stand out amongst the heavy fighters. Not even just so much that it's a heavy fighter and that's its role, because it's got a turret, it's got a bunch of guns, it's got a bunch of missiles, it's got a lot of health and hit points and shields. It's like that's also a forward long range heavy fighter. And it's going to defer dramatically when Pyro comes online and you have to stack it up against things like the Hurricane, which has kind of dominated Stanton to this point with regards to its heavy fighter status. And it's like you're not going to see a lot of lone Hurricanes out in Pyro, either as bounty hunters, pirates, whatever. And you're going to see that Vanguard kind of take on more of that role of a long range fighter, long range heavy fighter. And I think those are kind of the things with roles that they need to not only consider how does each ship fit? Is it a medium fighter? Is it a light fighter? Is it a heavy fighter? Like how do we build the variety of ships within the heavy fighter roles, ships within the medium fighter roles? Where do they stand out against their counterparts at roles? And with the new master modes and resource management, that becomes a big factor. And my initial thought.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest with that. And when we were coming up with these questions and topics, when we came up with this topic, it reminded me of the old engineering post from CIG, and I'm gonna drop the link in the chat. It's one of the old shipyard posts, and it's careers and roles, and it's back when they introduced the ship matrix, the infamous ship matrix. But when they were talking about roles, it made me remember that post, and they're still when they were talking about roles, they glossed over the roles mostly just because they were talking combat. Um, but there's and they talked about how they were using Squadron 42 to build this out and test it out. But obviously, there's a lot more roles within the ship ecosystem, and so there definitely seems a lot that remains to be said, remains to be seen for going outside those roles, because um, I think it's a good step with light, medium, and heavy fighters. But then there's that's like the size role. But then they talked about interdictors. They talked about light fighters. Are there going to be light, medium, and heavy interdictors as well?
That's a good
the bomber
question.
conversation. It's obviously it leaves also a lot of room for them to create more ships. But the differentiation within those roles is definitely something that remains to be seen. Kel, what are your thoughts as far as the ship roles and their classes, and how they fit in with the new master modes?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure we know. I'm kind of, yeah. It's challenging because, right? As you said, we don't know where goodness, I'm trying to put my thought together. I've been thinking about this, and it's just a hard subject to approach. So, you know, I feel like they still haven't really zoned in on where they want ship roles and ship types to be. So the Vanguard is the perfect example, right? Because you have a heavy fighter with size 2 components. In this case, because it's such a large fighter, it has a lot of duplication of capability. So, so that if you lose something in a firefight, you have another thing to take over or to replace it. So you have a lot of backups.
Yeah, redundant systems. Yeah, makes
Redundant
sense.
systems, and it makes sense. And then, but every other ship that has fallen into that category has been radically different. One was advertised as a boom and zoom, and then turned into the deepest health pool ship that we have, with the highest, I think, highest DPS of any 2-seat fighter. And then the next one was the Scorpius, and it was really good for a bit, and then it kind of got twisted around. But it has, I think they did add one size 2 component somewhere in it, but I think it primarily has size 1 components.
It's only got the one size 2 shield.
Right. And then it has a fairly, well, and that's going to impact its range. It's going to impact its well, I mean, the range is the big one, right? So, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's RSI, so it's going to have a little bit of armor, but those size 1 components and the lack of redundancy, I'm still not sure it stacks up as a heavy fighter against the Vanguard from that long range, high endurance, high ability to, in theory, a pack of Vanguard should be able to hold out a fairly long time on their own, because they got that high armor class. So I mean, each one is different, and we have the same thing in the mediums, although the mediums are a little bit more specialized. So you've got your kind of your stealth fighter in the Saber. You kind of got your brawler in the Hornet, and then the lights are all over the map too. So I don't know. It's for me. I'm not sure how the master mode is going to. I mean, I think it's great because the master mode is going to slow us all down. It's going to force us to get close. I think it's still going to be a rate fight, and I think the lights are, kind of, we've all seen the Avenger 1 video. Just like he said, right? Like the light fighters are still going to be dominant in their ability to get in the pocket and stay there and whittle you down. But I'm not sure how it's going to change that balance, or if it's designed to change that balance. So
I mean, I think what we all anticipate more than anything is the slight speed variation and the maneuverability that goes with, like, I think they're obviously going to have to tune acceleration when they tune speed, and we know that there's going to be that variation within the class roles. Heavy fighters are just not going to be as maneuverable in that pocket as light fighters, and medium fighters are going to straddle the line kind of one way or the other. I am curious though, and you mentioned it, like, how do you start bringing things like armor, into the game with this? They haven't even talked about it, and I know it's something they want to do, and I hope they have a plan in mind for, okay, we've got the speed thing locked down, we fixed that problem. Now, how do we dive into the other facets where we actually create meaningful differences and choice values
I'm not
within
sure.
these
I'm
new
not
ship
sure.
roles that we've created?
Yeah, I'm not sure armor's going to be that big of a factor, to be perfectly honest. I think they want it to be, but I don't think it will. And I think that's why some of the other guys out there talking about this kind of laugh at armor, right? So the thought process behind armor is it either mitigates damage, or in some cases for some weapons eliminates damage altogether. The reason why a hawk will not be able to do what we saw that one dude do, where he just did donuts around an Idris with a pair of size 2 shotguns, or 4 size 2 shotguns, and just killed an Idris, right? In theory, right, with armor, those size 2s won't even scratch the paint of the Idris. So he's just expending energy and nothing's happening to the ship, right? But in the fighter realm, which is, I think, where people feel like this is going to have the most influence, I mean, I think even if you've got like 90% damage mitigation on the hull on the Vanguard from a size 1, if you can't get the Vanguard around to shoot that little tiny fighter with size 1s, he's still going to 10% you down until you explode. And so it becomes, and I understand turrets are supposed to help a lot, right? Because, your turret gunner will turn around and shoot that guy, you hope. But I still think, I mean, the time to kill may increase with armor, but I don't know that it's gonna. I doubt there's gonna be a point where a heavy fighter is not worried about a light. And then on top of that, I mean, all the lights carry or can carry size 3s. I think all the
Yeah.
dedicated fighters anyway. So the
It feels like
Gladius, the Arrow, you know, they
it's
carry a
weird
size.
because there's with the size things, it almost because it's they say light, medium, heavy, as if it's a weight class, as far as tonnage, sort of thing, because it doesn't boil down to like the dimensions of the fighter because there's so much variation in the dimensions and what hangar they can fit in. But like you said, there is a lot of variety within the light, medium, and heavy of okay, you've got it's almost like an old school RPG in that within light you've got you can it instead of being a set build you can have a ship that leans more towards a DPS build or a stamina maneuver um, evasive build. You can you know
Yeah.
move your ships around within those sorts of roles. The light fighter that's more tanky than other light fighters, so maybe it would outlast a DPS build light fighter within the same sort of weight class. But I think you're right, Kel. As far as armor goes, it's going to buy you time, but it's not going to buy you immunity as it versus going up into the next size class of ship. You're going from a fighter to a actual size difference where you're now on a hammerhead and your fighter weapons at size 3 are just not going to hardly do anything or do nothing at all. Um,
Yeah.
and I think
Well, I think
within
size 3s will probably still affect ships like. I think they'll again, and I think it'll be damage mitigation. I think like a size 3 will still impact
yeah
to some extent an Idris or a Hammerhead, but it will be
yeah
reduced.
it's the I don't think you're going to penetrate the armor. I think you can still use those weapons to hit vulnerability points because you've got your shield emitters.
Yeah.
You have your thrusters, um, and there are other sort of component points of vulnerability um,
Right. Yeah.
that will allow even a small fighter to you won't disable an Idris. And obviously hitting thrusters, certain thrusters on a moving Idris, that's a small target. If the Idris is moving, you're gonna have a hard time disabling it, but given enough time and skill, you can definitely hamper an Idris's maneuverability, but you're not
You can
going to.
irritate them. You're like a mosquito.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And everybody hates mosquitoes, so um, yeah, it's and guys, as far as travel, what do you guys think? Do you think that will scale significantly between light, medium, and heavy? Um, obviously the Vanguard is the one that in lore is the hyped up as being the long range heavy fighter. Um,
Yeah.
but do you think it's going to be a you know Vanguard versus Scorpius? The Saber versus Hornet, the Gladius versus Arrow. Do you think
I
the the scale difference between them, going into Pyro is going to make that much of a difference, or
Oh,
I
I
want
think
it
it
to.
will. I think it
yeah,
will.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that like I don't think it is anymore, but the Atlas used to be the slowest but best endurance size 1 quantum drive, right? I don't know if it is anymore. But it was a good one, right? And so you could go across Stanton with a single tank of gas and get there, right? So then what does that buy you though in Pyro?
Nothing really.
Right, it
When
buys
you
you
look at the
maybe
fuel
half the
size,
system. Yeah,
yeah, when you look at the fuel size of most of the ships, like 80% of light fighters, medium fighters, heavy fighters have,
pour that
I
out.
think it's 583 units of quantum fuel,
Right.
with the exception of the Vanguard. I think in the Eclipse. The Eclipse has got like 1/300. But if it's a dedicated combat fighter, and it's not the Vanguard, and this, like I said, goes across all three categories. If it's not the Vanguard or the Eclipse, it's got like 583 units. So you can put
Yeah.
an Atlas drive on 80% of the fighters,
Yep.
and they would have the exact same range.
Yep.
And I think hopefully, as they tune within those classes, you'll get a little bit more variety, and you'll start to see an impact of those other things, those other systems besides weapons and shields that are really going to matter just as much, when you get to a bigger system.
Well, I mean, the first thing we always do when we're about to take out light fighters is go find a high endurance, long range quantum size one. Like that's the first component I always purchase because of ease of travel. But I think the big difference will be those ships that have the next tier of equipment are going to just have an easier time getting around those long distance areas. So the Vanguard probably, instead of having a lot of fuel left over after cutting across Pyro, might have less than a quarter tank left. I think right now it's got a third of a tank left when he burns on the stock engine or the stock QD when you burn across stamp.
Yeah.
So I mean, I imagine that maybe you'll have less than a quarter tank on the stock engine or something like that, or maybe you'll be empty. Maybe you can't do it on the stock tank, and you got to go find the high efficiency size too. But I think ships like the Carrack will probably have no problem getting all the way across because that's what they do.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So-
And the other thing with the roles part of it is, these other extraneous factors they're building into like these mode shifts with like quantum boost, quantum mode, and that time between shifting from SEM to quantum and how quickly they do it. There's a lot of potential there, not just for the interdictors, but even for, across the roles of ships, in terms of the combat oriented ones. Like, I would almost expect the Eclipse as a stealth bomber, be able to get in and get out. Maybe it takes a hit on its SEM speed, but maybe it gets back into quantum speed a little bit faster. Maybe not to the level of an interdictor, but more so than a light fighter, something more dedicated to SEM style combat can do, or something like that. There's just a lot of potential for tuning and growth and variation in the classes. I
And
think
we
in these
might
new
see
master modes.
we might see a component for that too.
That's what I was
That's
about
true.
to ask. Is
Yeah.
it's you bring up something interesting, and I don't think I've heard anyone mention it in any of the conversations. Is that the switching back and forth between the modes? Not only after watching the videos, I fully expect that there's within the classes there is going to be variation as far as top SCM speed, top acceleration. Just based off of this ship has this many thrusters, but then maybe you have this type of thruster, or the way they're oriented. You're still going to have ships that are going to have some, more maneuverability than others within the classes. But then that brings up an interesting point: is that something that CIG could use to further differentiate within the classes of, maybe an interceptor is able to switch, back and forth between the your master modes faster than a dogfighter,
But is
and
that a factor of the nature of the ship, or is it a piece of equipment in the ship that comes pre-installed? So
yeah,
like
that's what
maybe
I
military, and then you're all both of you are going to roll your eyes. A military grade capacitor or switch might operate at a much higher rate than a civilian or an industrial or stealth,
hmm
but maybe the industrial has uh, a higher disruption protection, right? Because it's
yeah,
Yeah.
industrial ships might get like miners and stuff like that might go into unstable regions to collect high value minerals, so they equip these industrial things that are less likely to get disrupted. Military grade maybe slightly beneath that. Competition grade, right, or racing grade might be like instantaneous, right? Boom, boom.
But it's fragile.
But it's fragile and it can
Yeah.
take damage. And if it takes damage, well, then maybe you can't switch it all, and you get locked into that location. That's why I could definitely see there being a new component introduced that allows us to tweak for the effect we want. And uh,
Yeah,
I don't know. I think that's a missed opportunity if they don't. And then, of course, capacitor gameplay. Have they talked about giving us options on replacing capacitors so that
that's
you have?
another thing is that I haven't ever seen because and because they haven't mentioned it as far as like shield, your capacitors as far as thrusters, weapons, shields. So you have three different types of capacitor systems, and so where are those capacitors? Are those capacitors on the
Yeah.
actual shield um, component itself? Are they on the weapon component itself? Are they somewhere else? Because
And so,
if
do you
it's
have one of those little maintenance things that you, or the cards that you can slide in and give yourself a capacitor boost,
yeah,
right, as a
yeah,
part of the component?
is there
Yeah,
is there a software component that you can augment via blades?
yeah, yeah.
There's a just an endless amount of ways where they can do it with very little work because it's literally just creating a ethereal component that you'll probably never see or just copy paste looks like this, you hold it in your hand, looks like anything else, but you slot it in and it has values to it. um, but it also it does further complicate the balance issue. um, oh
I wouldn't
my
expect
god.
anything like software or ethereal about capacitors. My thing about capacitors is, you know, real world capacitors exist
Hmm.
and they're literally just that. They're normally we use them to smooth out like voltages and stuff like that within circuits, but essentially that's what they do. They store voltage, potential energy,
Hmm.
and uh, the more potential energy they store, the bigger they are. What I would like to see is like tuning on the ships where certain capacitors, maybe the Gladius has a higher volume weapons capacitor, and maybe the gameplay for that is better is in, when you come back into SEM mode and whatever reserves you had stored when you shifted, you were last in SEM mode and it comes back, you had a bigger weapon store, you might come back with full weapons and a higher amount of shots for your laser repeater or something
Hmm.
like that. But you might suffer on the boost or the thruster capacitor or the shield capacitor. So maybe you can come back into SEM mode, and when you come back, like weapons are hot, ready to go, and you've got a slightly larger than full mag than most other ships, so you're ready to deal damage immediately. Um, Whereas you might not have as much boost, and maybe the arrow takes the lead on with a slightly more maneuverable class. Maybe it's got more boost. You watch Avenger One's video, boost is life. And when you run out of boost, you're dead. So
Hmm.
something along those lines. Um,
Differentiating within a class of you
yeah,
can this ship is designed to be you know because if you have different types of capacitors for different uh, components, maybe this ship is allowed can have three size 1 capacitors for your shield, whereas another one has two, or and vice versa for weapon capacitors for energy weapons, for your thrusters. um, that could be kind of like with the multiple component redundancy of the Vanguard. Maybe the
yeah.
Vanguard has um, you know that's you do the same sort of way to differentiate the Vanguard versus the Hurricane. The Hurricane ends up having more weapon capacitors of size 2, whereas the Vanguard has more in the way of engine or thruster capacitors, or power plant, shield, whatever you want to do for it. Um,
And
I'm
don't be wrong,
just
that
spitballing.
could all be stuff that fits down into the component level too. I would
Hmm.
just like to see it at the ship level. Like I
Yeah.
like the idea of tuning my ship with components too, but I want, I like our own military ecosystem has that whole, an F-18 is a good multi-role fighter and it's good in a dogfight and it's got, a good speed that it's good at a dogfight at. And then you have other planes that we have in our arsenal, like the A-10, which like that thing is good at flying low and dropping bombs and going burnt with its machine gun and just tearing everything apart with it. But it's not a good dogfighter.
Hmm.
And even within the dogfighting classes, we just have slight variations that make each plane slightly better at some things, not as good at others. And I like to see that same kind of ecosystem develop within the ship roles at the, within categorization, within the light fighters, within the medium fighters, within the heavy fighters. I want everybody making a choice basically about, I don't want individual metas. It's always going to be the Hurricane because it's just the best heavy fighter or whatever. I want there to always be that choice of like, well, the Hurricane is good for this situation, but this thing I'm about to go do in Pyro, I really want the Vanguard
Yeah,
based
you
on
choose the
other
ship based
attribute.
off of your play style, and
Yeah.
what the ship has that suits your play style.
Yeah, and not even just from a class perspective, like within the class, I chose this
Mhm.
ship because of.
That brings up another question, because we've been talking a lot about fighters, and I don't know about you, Night Cobb, as much, but I know Atira, you like flying your Vanguard. I know you do some dogfighting.
Yeah.
It's
I'm not
it's
good at dogfighting people, but I enjoy dogfighting.
yeah, it is definitely not something I do well at. Although eventually I'll get better with these sticks. Um, but I said it earlier how it seems like there's definitely a lot of focus because this is being tested out and developed in Squadron 42, where you are a fighter pilot. Um, as far as going out into the PU, and moving away from fighters, do you think there are any holes within the ship roles outside of fighters that need to be filled? And if you had your druthers, are there any that you'd see, like to see filled sooner rather than later? To create that same sort of ecosystem, but not in fighters, and maybe not even combat ships.
Oh, oh gosh, you just opened the aperture so wide. I don't know where to begin now. It started with "Are we missing fighters?" and now it's like not even combat ships. Ah, um, I mean, I think there's tons of holes.
Pick your top three. How about that, if you can?
Can I include ground vehicles?
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, yeah,
So
definitely.
We don't discriminate here.
infantry fighting vehicle, right? Something again, I'm always really big on something that can kind of sort of maybe probably fit into a a constellation class of ship, right? Because I really don't like the Spartan platform because it can only be moved by very specific large and expensive ships, and we should be able to move things via smaller, more accessible ships. So infantry fighting vehicle, that's one big gap. Uh, gosh, so we have the Vulcan, and we have what is it? The one with the crab, the Crucible. The
Ooh, the
Crucible.
crab.
Isn't that what that's called? The little crab thing? I don't know. Maybe
I didn't know that's what it was called, but I like
I
it.
could have thought
It does
it
look
was.
like a crab.
Maybe I'm wrong. And then, but we don't have anything in the middle. So we definitely need something more capable than a Vulcan, but less capable perhaps than the Crucible. So some type of repair, refit, rearm at a medium level. And then, oh gosh, a third category. You put me on the spot. Now my brain's reeling. So IFV, some type of logistics. Goodness. Oh, I know what. Here. I want. What was it that you called it? The Terrapin tank carrier,
Oh,
Oh.
the
right? A
well, so
Terrapin.
I've always wanted a Valkyrie
No,
variant
no,
that
Valkyrie.
carries. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The Valkyrie tank carrier. So rip out the top, rip out the side doors, rip out all of that crap. It's a pilot, maybe some gunners, and a back deck, kind of like oh god, the one that floats, the cargo ship that never has landing gear. It just hangs there.
The whole series.
No. What's the latest one, or one of the newer ones that
Oh, the Nomad doesn't
yeah, the
have landing
Nomad.
gear. Yeah.
Yeah, the Nomad. So like the Nomad's truck bed, right? It's just an open thing with walls, right? So it's just a Valkyrie. It's just open. The ramp comes up or goes down. You drive the tank in backwards. It sits there. Valk drops. Tank drives out. Away you go. Small ship. It could cost less than a standard Valkyrie because it has less guns and less real capability, right? It has no drop seats, right? The crew rides in the tank. It should probably be $100, $50 to $100 less. It's just something to carry a thing. One, and then that would be awesome.
It's pretty good.
Those are
Yeah.
my
Pretty
three.
good list.
I've long wanted if you're familiar with, if you remember the Clone Wars, they had their dropship that, if you were in the one with the Jedi, that was the one that was going to survive. The one with the random nameless troopers was the one that was going to get blown out of the sky above. Oh dang, what was the name of the planet with the bugs?
Camino.
Geonosis.
Geonosis. I'm
Geonosis. There we go.
I'm broke. Yes, Geonosis.
Yeah. But if I've always like it, you talked about not having to use great big ships to move large vehicles, because the Hercules and the Liberator it's a lot of extra ships, so you can carry multiples. Well, why don't we have a ship that's smaller, in the medium ship range, that can carry one? But we don't. We have zero. We have nothing below that large ship class that can carry even a single one of those heavy vehicles. But it
So
also. I'll go for it.
So if I can just take us down the rabbit hole of logistics, large organizational fights are not going to be purely spaceborne launched, right? They're just not. It's going to be really hard to just take everything you need, jump into a new system, and then attack. I think there will be cases where that's effective, but I think most of the time what you're going to see is they're going to find a planet in that system where they can rearm, refuel in relative safety, right? Or in orbit, whatever. And then they're going to, right? Maybe they claim a bunch of vehicles like we do now, and it pops up where they are. And then they pull those ships out, right? And then they spend 2 hours, 3 hours building out what they're going to do, loading vehicles onto the thing. And then from that planetary location, right, that point of security, right, it can't be blown up in space, right? It can't be, well, it can be attacked, but it's going to put limitations on the attackers. Then they're going to lift off from there and go to their objective, right? Like a forward staging base.
Yeah,
And
a FARP, but for
a FARP.
fuel,
a forward operating base, a FOB in the truest sense, right?
Yeah.
So
maybe not like a one that is permanent, lasts for a whole decade, but
20 years.
Yeah.
It's fine. No, yeah, but yeah, I mean, because you could, like, let's say you take your favorite ship, right? Your personal favorite ship, right? The floating aircraft carrier in space, and you land that down on the ground, right? And then you're cracking, and then from there, that's your command and control hub, right? It's on the planet, right? Or it's just in orbit, a long way away from everything, and then from there, right? You're sending stuff off, stuff's coming back. You're rotating. Your Valks are taking your tanks. You could take 4 Valks, 4 tanks, at the dollar cost, and probably in-game cost. Well, in-game cost exponentially cheaper, but dollar cost also exponentially cheaper than a C2, right? Right, and then you take all that capability, you drop it down. That's a tank platoon. Those Valks then pick up. They head back. They pick up 4 more tanks. They come back, right? 4 more tanks. Now you have a company minus sitting there maneuvering on the battlefield, right? And that's a way more accessible ship than the C2. And I think people will, I mean, obviously people will get it in game eventually, but I mean now, pre pre-game launch, we're not selling ships anymore. Like now in the alpha, people buying ships. I think that would be a fantastic way to launch a forward deployed force into an attack. So
Nightcop, what about you? As far as your top three holes that need to be filled, because everybody always jokes, oh, no more fighters, because we have a lot of fighters. That ecosystem is pretty well fleshed out.
I agree.
I think even at the light, medium, and heavy role, and this question was brought, for me, it was the impetus of this was, hey, we're finally getting our second dedicated bomb carrying bomber. But there's obviously a lot of holes that need filling out. If you had your druthers, what would your top three be if you were dishing out priorities to CIG?
So, I mean, my top one would be I like my stealth bombers. So I love the Eclipse, but the Eclipse is rather light in terms of that category. And, the Retaliator is kind of in that middle ground, but it's not stealth. And I want something around that size that is like a stealth ship. So it's like,
you said Retaliator?
Yeah, around Retaliator size, like stealth ship. And, that gameplay is not really there yet, so, I'm kind of just waiting in the wings on that one. That's my primary. I'm glad to see that they're fleshing out the bombers.
So as far as stealth for the Retaliator, are you talking about it's a torpedo bomber, but unlike it's differentiated within that class as the same class as a Tally towards stealth versus the Tally being able to fight off attackers, having.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't want something with like a ton of turrets, attached to it, because the Tally has like 4 turrets on it.
More,
yeah. I'll be honest with you, it's not one of my favorite ships, but it's basically one of those. I don't know. You can't even call it a heavy fighter. Bigger than that.
Well, that's a heavy bomber, I think, but you're talking about a heavy stealth torpedo bomber.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be, as tough as a Retaliator is. I don't actually expect it to be as tough as a Retaliator, but I want something that's more geared toward that stealth. I want my submarine in space. If you guys haven't figured this out yet, that's what I'm describing. I want my little fast attack submarine in space.
Mm-hmm.
I just want more stealth gameplay outside of the medium fighter size, because that's essentially where the Eclipse, the Ghost, and then you got a few light fighters, like the Talon Shrike, doing the stealth thing. I want to see something a little bit bigger, geared for stealth combat or stealth gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
And not just by components. Something that, something sleek, dark, deadly looking, with a really low cross section, but it's a little bit larger.
You're screaming Aegis. They're the ones that have built the stealth tech, so.
And I'm down with that. If it ends up being an Aegis ship, I'm down.
Like, Aegis reinventing themselves to be a company that designs stealth oriented ships, and ships made to be that way, with the Saber and the Eclipse and who knows what else. But that could be an interesting way for them to reinvent themselves post Messer era and the Great Purge.
Yeah, I know chat's saying I'm describing a Tally. I don't want it to be, the Tally's it's a heavy bomber that comes in and kind of like wreck shop with torpedoes and turrets. It's not subtle about it though. I want the subtle variant. I want something that, and if maybe it's a variant on the Tally.
No, I get you, man.
That would be down.
I was in a dogfight. We were in a friendly dogfight once, and we had an Eclipse with us, and he had all stealth components, and he was maybe 500 meters from me and vanished off my radar. So, I mean, so it makes sense to me that you want a ship like that, that has that low signature, but has the same kind of, well, maybe slightly less overall bomb strength because you are adding that stealth. But you get that.
Oh,
I get what you're
yeah.
saying. I get what you're saying. You want something that's a little bit larger, tougher, maybe that size 9 torpedo, but maybe not, what, 6 of them. But you want it in a stealth package. I get it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but multi crew,
But
to
multi-crew, yeah.
versus the Eclipse, which is
Multi-crew.
just a
Yeah.
solo. So you maybe you split the difference on torpedoes, or maybe they add a different size torpedo and you can carry more of those. Um, that would be an interesting proposition. To give you that multi crew thing, because I would like to see stealth gameplay in a ship like that be heavily impacted by your engineer. You know, so
Exactly. Exactly.
your engineer is doing the resource management necessary, and it's an active process to keep you stealthed. And if you get detected, well, then your engineer's out of position, and they have to change over to get in the turret, and you only have like 2 or 3 defensive turrets, because that would make it really interesting. And the CIG has always talked about how they don't want anything to just be set and forget. They want, if you're going to do something, it's an active process. um, oh, a Tirakel with the first time chat. But yeah,
Well,
I really
because
like
I
that
see what they're
idea.
saying. Size increases signature.
Size
The
increases. Yeah.
B2 is a effing huge platform
Mm-hmm.
with like the
That's right.
cross section of a sparrow. Why is that? It's because it's a combination of the shape language of the aircraft
Mm-hmm.
and the materials that it is constructed of, and then the exterior coating that is applied.
Yeah. I could
Right?
imagine the repair costs for your stealth ships with your stealth, your stealthy
Yeah.
materials for the
Exactly.
hull would be dramatically higher. So if you
And it,
do
and
get
it might
found
be
in
for
somebody,
every and it might be for every single mission.
yeah,
Yeah. In
Right?
the submarine
Regardless.
force, we use sound dampening tiles. Because it's a different game with the submarines, but obviously it's
I
sound
need those
related,
in my
not so
house
much.
so that way I can't hear my wife,
Yeah.
clip clapping across the bridge.
You have a
So
Exactly.
bridge?
no, that's what it's like. She walks on her heels around on the hardwoods, and I can hear her from across the house. And she's not stealth. She
Ah,
is the yeah.
she's got to level up her rogue. Someone says that this could be the A1 Spirit if bombs can swap for torpedo racks. I think in some ships bombs will be able to swap for torpedoes. I don't think that's the case for the A1 because the A1 mounts theirs like the Germans. Some Germans did in World War One, where they're perpendicular
Yeah.
uh, to the aircraft, so you won't be able to launch torpedoes from that. But
I think that's going to be
I
another way that they differentiate bombers, is that some will be able to hot swap out, bomb bays for torpedo bays, and other ones will be bespoke. Like I could
yeah,
see the
and you
yeah
carry larger weapons with the bespoke setup, but
exactly. Yep.
smaller airframes will be or space frames will be able to take a variety of loadouts with um, you know, multi-role.
Hmm. So
Also,
that's
a fully blacked out A1 stealth would be amazing.
I mean,
But
that
ooh,
would be cool if that was a
but
variant
but I
number.
but I do feel like because Crusader is fast and fairly tough, that's filling a different role in the bomber community than something that would be slightly slower, stealthy, uh, you know, creeping in low altitude, that type of stuff, or masking behind a planet or masking in the sun. If you're in space, and then that's different. I don't know that that's what that's specifically designed to do. So
sorry, Raptor in the chat. Um, so that's this is actually a good segue. But before we move on to, because we were going to talk more about bombing anyway. But before we
yeah.
do that, I wanted to give my top three.
Well, we
And
only got one from Night Cobb.
oh
Well,
geez, did
you
we?
honestly you stole my you stole my other ones. We need a right size logistical repair ship. or something along those lines. I feel like we're just missing some size categories there. And I totally agree with you with the vehicles. Like the Spartan is too big, the Nova is too big. When all you can carry around in a Valkyrie is pretty much, the bikes or a Cyclone. We're missing the mark on combat vehicles that the Valk should be able to carry in. There has to be
Yeah.
something that's slightly smaller. And if it's like you said, infantry attack vehicle, I'd be fine with, something else if they want to fill that role. I don't really have a good example of anything else off the top of my head. I'm not a ground pounder.
I can
or,
make
or
you
armor
one.
for that matter.
I could teach you. Yeah, great.
He can be taught.
Oh, I'm sure. I would love to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. If you're offering me a ride in one of those vehicles, my answer is default yes, by the way.
Oh, not
Trey.
me, not anymore.
Oh, in real life, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a flyboy now, so it's nothing but Blackhawks and Lakotas for me, and on the Army, and then on the
Okay, I wouldn't say
civilian
no to
side.
that either. Just saying it, just
Just
putting it
as
out
a
there in the
heads up.
universe.
Yeah, Blackhawks are a ton of fun. So maybe if you ever make it up to Boise, I can get you along for a guest ride. But
Ooh.
yeah, so I totally agree with you guys. On so the only issue with the Connie is the Connie's vehicle / cargo bay does limit it. Like there's not a lot of room left around the Ursa rover for much more of a vehicle. It could be a bit taller. And I think that, maybe I think you have a little bit more room lengthwise, so you could maybe get a little
Yeah.
bit longer. And so I think it would be a really tight fit to get, but I think that's part of the differentiation part is if we do have infantry fighting vehicles, I want to see, I would love to see more than one. I would like to see like 3 different infantry fighting vehicles.
I'd
One
like to see
is,
more than one tank.
yeah, that too. But like the tank has been, and this is lore nerd Adam, or Tree coming back. Adam's my first name. It's out. Great. But the infantry fighting vehicle, the tanks have been brought back. Like the Nova is an old thing, just like the
Yeah.
Perseus that is now being brought back for use. As far as infantry fighting vehicles, I'd like to see one that is wheeled like the Marine Corps LAV-25, but then you also have one and that is tracked, and maybe because of the tracks it can carry heavier armor, it has more survivability, and maybe that one is kind of Bradley-esque in that it carries 6 troops, and has a slightly larger gun, has more heavier armor, but isn't as fast. Whereas you have one that's on 6 wheels like an LAV, a larger Ursa platform, that's like a combat platform, not just a rover. And then it can carry 4 troops, because that's what an LAV does. The Marine Corps LAV does. It has 4 troops in the back, 4 dismounts, and then a 3-man crew. It's on 8 wheels, but an LAV is going to outrun a Bradley all day long, but an LAV doesn't have the survivability. And then maybe you've got your fancy hover one or something. I don't know how to like create a third if we're working in
Tech, baby. Yeah.
maybe there's
Give-
I just don't know how you differentiate a hover one versus the lighter weight one. Like maybe the I don't know, it's maybe just rule of cool to give it a third option. Yeah, maybe it strafes, it has the ability to strafe, and that's the differentiation. But if you could make those all fit, snugly, but fit within, your Connie, your Valkyrie vehicle bay, what
MSR.
else? Yeah, the
mean,
MSR is a good one. Do we have any other vehicle bays that are about that size? That are
well, the
not
Carrax
quite...
is much
Yeah.
wider, but
Mhm.
it's also not super tall.
And it's not super deep.
And it's not super deep. But yeah, I mean,
I think there's a big gap, because those are like the medium combat ground vehicles. We have a good number of the light. If we're thinking like light fighter, medium fighter, heavy vehicle,
Yeah.
Obviously we need more tanks, but we don't really have anything in that medium class. And if you could, change it so that, instead of a size 3 cannon, you have a size 3 repeater, one's, more AP versus, anti-infantry, that sort
That's
of
all about ammo
ability.
type.
Yeah.
That's just ammo
Um,
It's
type.
true.
HE
well,
rounds
and
versus
but something like
some
if it's a
propulsion
repeater and
round.
it's got 3 barrels, the rounds aren't as big, but you have 3 barrels, higher rate of fire versus a single cannon goes boom, like a,
Yeah, but I've seen a Bradley's 25 millimeter with Sabo depleted uranium rounds tear through T-72 hulls like they were
oh yeah,
butter.
yeah.
So the size of the round doesn't always matter so much as the material you're firing.
hmm
Um,
I'm just thinking
by
from in-game balance points of,
oh well, sure,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, you're customizing your infantry fighting
Sure,
vehicle
sure,
for,
sure. Whatever. Yeah, game
well, no,
balance.
you, you,
Okay.
so I'm thinking you have your wannabe Atira Kell who's on your team who's done your intelligence gathering, and he knows that the people you're going up against don't have any heavy armor, but they outnumber you like 3 to 1. So maybe you choose to have your size 3, repeating gun or Gatling on your turret for your infantry fighting vehicle versus the size 3 cannon with the slower rate of fire, because you need to suppress infantry. You don't need to get through armor. Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I would love
So
it. I
that's
would love
my,
to see. And if they gave us our Valk tank dropper, that
yeah.
same $250 ship could be used to take all those medium vehicles if they
hmm
exceed a Connie
Oh yeah.
uh pay.
And I
Right.
think a Valk taking those medium vehicles would be great. I think that would is definitely my second of giving us a Valk variant, and it's one of the things I've been hoping for, because they did in the Valk Q&A years ago, they did say that they discussed and have ideas for numerous variants, and one of the top ones is a medical variant, a medical SAR variant. But I also hope that like the Star Wars Clone Wars Lat C type thing, where it's got some sort of clamping mechanism in order to just latch onto a heavy vehicle, because you could,
Yes. Oh,
you know,
yes, that.
well, because that's,
Just a
for,
bunch of tankers hanging on for dear life underneath, going, "Holy shit, we're
yeah,
gonna."
yeah, they're looking out through little glass, and you're like, how high up do you think we are? Are these
We're
grappling arms
still in
going to
orbit,
work if we
Bill.
lose
Don't look
power?
down.
um, and
Well, I
that
also want to be able to fly it and shoot out the back of the Valk with the main gun. Right?
for a little extra boost.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
or
race it in the
the
tank.
the
Like, hey,
woe
that
to the
scene for the A
fighter,
team is viable. Like, you think we
woe
can do that?
woe to the light fighter that starts climbing up your tailpipe, right? And then the
Yeah,
tank's like, oh, let me just power on real quick.
yeah.
Boom!
Light fighter is dodging your top and bottom turret on the Valkyrie and gets directly behind you, where he has almost no, your turret gunners have almost no field of view on him, but then all of a sudden the ramp drops down and
Yep, there he is. Ding, ding, ding.
man, talk about, that would be a pretty cool cinematic moment if somebody was doing
Yeah.
a machinima. That's my number two. My, I'm not going to be, Blizzrat isn't here because he's at work. He's one of our mods here on my Twitch, but also in my Discord. But he knows that I'm the super fan fanatic, the founding member of the LHD cult. So I'm not going to mention that one, because my other thing that I'd really like to see, you guys were talking about like logistics support, and my my idea for an LHD isn't a ship that can land; it's a ship that deploys Valkyries or this heavy vehicle Valkyrie variant. But I do feel like we need a ship that acts as a fob, something that is kind of, imagine the Pioneer, not made by Consolidated Outland. I don't think of them as like a military contractor, but it has the VTOLs in that it can land, but it has everything you need to provide support, combat service. We call it in the Marines, we call it combat service support. And so
Yep.
it can
Yep.
refuel and rearm your ground vehicles. It can, has a couple med beds and ample supplies for your ground troops. Has maybe a small barracks and everything. but and it has maybe like a medium pad, for a ship to land on, but it deploys in a way that it can't function out in space. It lands and then deploys. Yeah, like a prefab base, but then it can, because one thing I love about CIG and their ship devs is they incorporate a lot of really cool animations into their ships as far as like
Yeah.
landing and things folding out and moving. And I see something sort of shaped like, for the Pioneer. You could probably do it even smaller than a Pioneer, I think, if it's really just for, vehicle. It's not for vehicle storage. Vehicle parks next to it, or pulls up into the garage, and can get repaired, get refueled, rearmed, pulls back out. It has a medium-sized pad on top, so a good-sized ship like a Valkyrie can land on it and then resupply it, bring additional troops, that sort of thing. But it has to land and then deploy, so that way you have access to those things. So it becomes very role specific, but invaluable for what you were talking about, Kel, in that we need to project power, but my org's centered 2 systems over, and we
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
attack, or maybe um, your well, what's the word, Kel, as far as you're harassing. You want to harass, a enemy org, or even NPCs, NPC organizations, groups, what
Harass
have you.
works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you want
Harass
to have
interdict. H&Is, so harass and
exactly.
interdict.
Yes, there we go.
Okay.
You want to do
HI
that
fires.
on this planet, but instead of having to build a permanent base using somebody's Pioneer, um, you
And then
can
you can move your
land.
base too.
Yeah, you can land someplace. It has limitations. It obviously isn't, um, a full on, massive fortress or anything like that.
Sure.
But it's enough to provide combat service support to your platoon size element.
So
And
key to
maybe.
that would be some level of point defense against
Mhm.
missiles,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That,
A
that
couple
only
remote
deploy in ground
turrets.
mode.
Hmm.
Only deploy in ground mode, which would
Yeah.
be sick because it would force you to get close. So pretty like 1 or 2 big man turrets, right? For if people decide to close the gap and attack you. Only usable in deployed mode. But if,
Hmm.
if I may date myself and maybe my fellow co-hosts here, do you remember the original Optimus Prime toy and the trailer for him?
Oh yes. Okay, that one I know. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I think about when you say that. Is it opens up and all the little things come out, and then that's like the mobile base for transformer operations. Is this
That's
this
a great example. And I was
yeah.
thinking, do you remember the Micro Machines ones that was, it
Yes.
folds up and it has a little handle, but yeah,
No,
if the
both.
ship,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
if I think you could get away with it in a ship that, when in flight, is a large size ship and needs to be escorted. It's pretty vulnerable. Because like the Liberator is pretty, obviously pretty vulnerable. It's a large ship, taller than the Liberator because it folds out, and you know um, when on the ground it punches above its weight class as far as support. But in the air it's very vulnerable. In space it's vulnerable. But then, you know, you unfold it, it sets up on some pylons, and you've got a vehicle garage, you've got a landing pad, you know, you can store fuel and supplies, and garrison a few troops, and it has some defensive turrets, but that way you can conduct operations, um, that your Valkyrie can land on that pad, pick up the platoon and the vehicle, and then fly off, and then come back and
Yeah.
bring everybody.
That would be that is a good one. I
It
like
I mean,
gives
I think
you that in between of
yeah.
the capital class is the LPD class that I really want to be able to be purchasable in game. That would be much larger, much more costly to operate, but it carries everything with it, whereas this has to go somewhere and then deploy, but then your Valkyrie follows along, with your vehicle and your troops. It's and then you also have a couple of fighters escorting. You could have a really robust, combat team, in that, but it isn't, dozens upon dozens of people. It's, you know, you've got one infantry fighting vehicle and up to 20 troops, and the ship crews, and you can go maybe 2-3 jumps away, and go have a bunch of fun for an extended period, and then pick up and leave.
I think the biggest thing for that would be whoever's in your group, this ship would have to auto generate a planetary quantum beacon for you to orbit to it.
That's true.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, so like, because you're gonna jump back to your planet for repairs, and then you're gonna fly for 10 hours to get to your your ship, or because you're in the party, or you can join the party as depending on how you want to structure it, and then you can loop around to it to within 20K and land. That would be critical for that ship to work, but I think it's a good idea. It'd probably be in the same price category as a Liberator, but because it sounds like it has a lot of the same capability. The issue is I don't think the Liberator can do the repair, rearm, refuel, maybe refuel, but
yeah. The trade-off being this provides support when deployed, but doesn't provide transport. Liberator provides transport, but doesn't provide as much support.
correct. Yeah. I think that would be a good balance. And then I still think the Liberator is super tanky though. So very tanky on the move, and maybe this is pretty tanky on the move too. But once it sets on the ground, at least at a minimum, a few point defense to keep missiles at bay. I think it'd be good. Yeah, that's a fun design, a real fun design, or concept idea. Yeah.
I got started thinking about that because I also think that in the future we should have a capital class combat service support ship that does sort of the same thing but for ships. In that it is meant to support your large combatants, not just Kraken lands a bunch of fighters on it. It's this ship carries your fuel, but your fuel, but also has stores for replenishment, underway replenishment, as well as underway repair for larger ships.
So someone here says Navy repair frigate in the chat. I know that we have large ships that go with the fleet, and then we have these complicated pulley systems that run back and forth supplies that are needed to resupply the ship.
Yeah.
Are those armored, or are those just civilian grade gray hulls?
Civilian grade gray hulls, yeah, because I've done underway replenishment many times,
but they're effectively a civilian ship with the equipment to interface and resupply, or are they like armored?
They're military.
Yeah, it's
a
Navy ship. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We even have tenders. So we have submarine tenders, which are relatively large surface ships, and they're basically a designated maintenance and repair ship for submarines on forward deployment and away from their normal repair and support activities. But they're Navy vessels, and you can literally moor right outboard of them and conduct repairs, and they have special designed facilities within that allow that repair to happen.
See, I think I worry that they think that's what the Crucible is going to be, right? Because it's going to spider out.
I think that's what they think. Yeah.
And then it's going to do the repairs and stuff. But for like an Idris or for a Javelin, you'd need I don't know.
Well, on the
10 or so.
I don't see the Crucible being able to do anything for larger ships other than patch holes. Those little arms, they're not little, those big arms. Yeah. I don't see those arms doing anything other than being able to patch holes in the side of the ship. As far as providing structural repair, or replacing exterior components, I don't know. We'll see. Salty Cactus.
I think if you're missing an
Idris
external
stuff
component,
is ages old. It's so old. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the Crucible, because they did do part of the reconcept. They didn't finish it, and or it's still the the rest of the reconcept work is still scheduled. Last I checked, but it's not going into production now, whereas it was supposed to go into production. So
But the
maybe
Crucible is also a repair ship. It's not
yeah,
necessarily a resupply ship.
exactly. It has very
So
little onboard storage as far as SCU compared to what you would
yeah,
need to keep your Perseus, your Nautilus, your
Javelin, you're not sure any of
yeah,
them. Yeah,
yeah, everything from large to capital class combatants. Keeping those underway and in the fight, you got nothing. And it
yeah.
doesn't,
I
you don't
appreciate
need
you
anything that's going
including
to do
Nautilus.
full capital repair, but some, a little bit of something, or at least carry the stores so that way you can replenish, the the things that you do repair underway with. Um, but yeah,
What's going to be interesting to me is how we do that resupply as players, right? Because they want to physicalize cargo. They want to do all, I mean, that's the big thing, right? Cargo refactor, physicalized cargo, pulling boxes off one area, feeding into another. Okay, cool story, Chris Roberts. So how how are we going to feed food into the mess hall, right? Are the NPC crews just going to do that? Is the ship just going to magically draw from the hull? How does the ammo work? Right? If we pull in a 40-foot container and gently nudge it across the vacuum of space into the hold of a javelin, where does that ammo go? Right? Do we as individuals have to crack open that 40-foot container and then pull out cases of ammo and drag it through the ship and then put it into the magazine? Uh, how fuel. I mean, God bless the Starfarer. You're not going to resupply a javelin with Starfarer, right? So what is going to come alongside as a fuel as a tender ship and refuel a? I don't even know if we can fully refuel a destroyer underway. I assume we can at least give them some
yeah,
fuel.
that's the that's, well, we're
So,
getting off on a
so
tangent.
we are, but now I'm just you said Navy logistics ship, and now we're just off on a tangent. I'm like, how is all this gonna work? How are they gonna I mean, I guess in theory in space, because it is space, you could dock just like you would a Starfarer on a Javelin. It's irrelevant. It's three-dimensional space. You can do that, but does it even hold close to the amount of fuel that Javelin needs to operate, or
Ooh,
Nidris,
I
or
feel like that conversation lends itself into the resource management and what is the fuel efficiency of like the power plant of a
Mhm.
javelin.
Well,
Because
before we get on that because we are going to
yeah,
talk a little bit about that when we get down to master modes in general. Um, and I had meant for us to segue into bombers, but then when I did my three, we're all like, "Ooh, what do we do?" But let's
yeah, your fault.
let's reel it back in and let's talk bombing for a little bit, just because I know that it's we did just get the Spirit. There was a big hullabaloo regarding the Aid 2. We're not going to talk about that. Um, let's leave Morph alone. He's a good dude. But
He is a good
we
dude, and he shouldn't take any of those hits. He's
yep.
welcome to have an opinion.
But we
yeah,
only have the two dedicated bombers, as in dropping bombs. We have
Gladiator is
bombers.
also a bomber.
Yeah, but we have bombers that carry torpedoes. Um, and we don't know to what extent they will be able to carry bombs. Like I'm really hoping the Tally gets, a bomb bay module, for carrying bombs, you know, bombs, not torpedoes. Um, but then we have also seen when they're doing the work for bombing, they use the Gladius, and so they've talked about doing wing mounts for,
Yeah.
ships like the Gladius for externally mounting, like small bombs, your little 500-pound
Yeah, size
JDAMs or
one,
whatever.
size twos. Yeah.
Yeah. But they haven't talked more about that. And as far as the Crusader Spirit A1, do you think now is the right time to introduce a I want to call it a medium bomber. I think because it is still two people and they're size fives. I think there's room for a dedicated bomber in the small or light bomber role. Maybe that isn't the Gladiator. Um,
Yeah, it's a tough one.
I think it's irrelevant. They
mhm.
design and concept ships based on the ideas they have at the time, right? So somebody said, "Hey, I've got an idea for a new ship and it's a bomber." And they're like, "Hey, that's cool." Right? And they didn't have an idea for something else. Right? Or they have tons of ideas, but right now they're working on the Crusader line, and so the idea of a Crusader bomber is what they felt was right for the time because they're building that design language and they're building that towards the Gemini, right? That's right. Yep, the person carrier, the airplane, the 747. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, hiccup.
So
Yep.
I, I who cares? It's a new ship, right? We're probably not going to see it for 6 months to a year. Who cares, right? It's a ship. It looks badass. It's going to fill a role. Hopefully, it's really fast in a straight line, and it's hopefully you can drop 50% of the load. So 5, because right now you can only fire like 4 missiles, right? That's the max. So hopefully it can drop 50% of its load on one target. Hopefully you can do things like stagger the drop so that you can, it's not all at once, so that you can get a little bit of distance between rounds. So you don't have what
Ooh, a
happens with
ripple.
the A2, right? Because if you drop 2 bombs in the A2, whichever one lands first basically pops the other bomb, and then it has no effect, right? So, there's I whether or not, I mean, I think it's a perfectly fine time to introduce a new bomber. I think it brings the profession of bomber into a more affordable price range, which means more people can involve it. I don't think an A1 is going to be able to pop a Carrack or any of these larger ships on the first run, maybe. So I think that's okay, right? So that alleviates a lot of that concern that more bombs is just going to be more trolling. Um, I'm all for the idea of making a profession accessible at all levels, and I agree with you. I think this is more of a medium-esque mid-tier bomber, and I think each of the bombers, I think combat ships more than mid, light, whatever, late game, early game, for the combat craft, it's more about the role that fills, and whether you're early game or late game depends on your skill, right? Because we know an Arrow and a Gladius are some of the most dangerous damn ships in the verse, but they're light fighters for like right under $70 or something like that, or whatever the cost is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
right? But in the right hands, it's a freaking demon. So I think the A1 is fine. I think it's just another step in the evolution of developing multi-domain combat, if I'm going to use an army term, and
Ooh,
then
fancy.
multi-domain
Night
operations.
Cobb. That's officer speak. I'm not sure what he was talking about.
He lost me.
Yeah, I need you to break it, put it into smaller words or less of
Smaller
you.
words, but it's
Tell it to us like we eat crayons.
Yeah, yeah.
it's just the next step, right? I think it'll be great. That's my 2 cents.
What about you, Night Cobb? What do you think?
I'm fine with more bombers coming into the discussion and into the game. I'm with Atira really on this one to make it short and sweet. Like more professions, more gameplay from different aspects. I'm down with it, and I like the challenge, that it proposes with ground combat. I'm also with it in that if they're gonna do that, and I like that they're doing it already with the Centurion, need the ecosystem to be developed where everything's got a counter. There's always a
Mm-hmm.
bigger fish, or there's always a fish that's slightly better at, taking out that thing that comes along with each new iteration combat and stuff like that. So, you want to build a fancy new medium bomber? Give me a mobile SAM site that's like really, really good at taking that medium bomber out. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and more things that the bombers are useful for. And I think that's maybe where we're going as far as without the outposts and settlements, as well as hopefully maybe more ground vehicles, because like the Moab is just stupid overkill right now,
Yeah.
and
Oh, but it is in real life too, so it's amazing.
yeah, yeah, but it's the whole we are.
Loyalty.
It's going to cost in game, because the other counter is how much is it going to cost, and when you can't just um, claim your A2 and get a fresh couple of Moabs, then it's gonna that's gonna hamper that enough as it is. But then as part of as part of that whole conversation with Morph, making it that there are effective counters, not just in player oriented but game oriented counters, as far as dying being an issue, and then replacing your super expensive size 10 bombs. You're going to need that, but also giving appropriate targets for it, I think is going to be important, and I'm hoping that we're going that way. So right now that we have this scene that everybody's looking at right now, and then the intro scene that if you were here early, you saw the intro video that I made. I worked really hard on that. I think it came out really well. I think it looks super cool.
You did a good job. Just in case nobody else says it. You definitely did a good job.
Yeah,
I included a whole bunch of elements in like a sequence of events, so that it's almost like the three of us are invading a goddamn planet, but it going back and forth between in-game stuff and out-of-game stuff. Anyway, so the size 5 bombs, and there's 10 of them, right?
Yes.
So I think with the advent of announcing the concept for the Spirit A1, it's interesting, and I'm going to make another scene so that I can transition to it, and our cameras will be off to the side, and we can see something that we can throw up on screen, because bombs are still being worked on, and I didn't notice this until I started doing a little digging while I was preparing for this episode. And when bombs were first added to the progress tracker prior to 3.15, and then they released with 3.15, that was the end of that sprint, and I hadn't looked at it since. Well, since then, that sprint has elongated, and the weapons content team has been working on bombs ever since 3.15 and the release of bombs. And so to me, that suggests that they are going to be adding more to the bombing gameplay, adding more bombs to the bomb sizes that we have, giving bombs to the ability to arm bombs on ships without dedicated bomb bays, pylon mounted, but also hopefully giving us targeting systems in order to because they did talk about how the bombing gameplay is super rudimentary right now. It is just
very much so.
Does this function? And obviously that is not how CIG does things. And so I anticipate that we're going to see, an update to bombing gameplay in the not too distant future. The other thing that's of interest, and you can't see it, but I'm looking at the progress tracker right now. And so we asked Jake Acapella, the guy who manages the roadmap amongst many other things. God bless Jake Acapella. But we asked him, is the Spirit on the progress tracker? And he said it is one of the unannounced ships. He just forgot to make it unannounced so we could see which one it is, and he'll make the change next roadmap update or sooner than that. And so we don't know if it's going into production soon or not, or if it's already out of concept art and into production. But the fact that they're still working on bombs makes me think that with the advent of the Spirit, that we could see bombing gameplay tier 1, maybe next year. And I'm hoping that will coincide with their plans regarding pyro and the settlements and outposts and underground facilities, other things for us to, want to hold and defend, want to attack, and maybe some more ground vehicles. Because if you've ever played War Thunder, that was one of my favorite things in War Thunder, was to dive bomb ground vehicles, tanks, columns of tanks. Sorry, Kel. Um, yeah, I'm probably they weren't Americans. They were always every
Yeah,
time they were they were Nazis. So, but
yeah, that's one.
it's bombing a moving target versus, oh, there's Jumptown, and not challenging at all. And so I'm
Yeah,
really
so
hoping for an expansion of that.
I hope they watched my video because I put a lot of effort into describing what that should look like. Um,
Let's see.
Salty, the guy in the chat, Salty Cactus, he actually helped me. He went to DCS, and he put it up there. So constantly computed release impact point, constantly computed release point, uh, dive bombing. There's toss bombing. There's all kinds of mechanics. There's guided munitions. Um, that they can incorporate into the bombing gameplay. And one of the things that I said that we should absolutely have is, and it's broadly speaking. So the guy I talked to for that video was a retired B2 pilot, and the B2 has the ability to image its own target, develop its own impact points, then drop the bombs, while the pilot is flipping off the guy below him and laughing, right? Not all aircraft can do that. So
That takes multi-crew though, because you need to have a dedicated person for the middle
yeah,
finger.
no, absolutely. Well, there's a dedicated person for the middle finger, but there's a dedicated person for doing the imagery, the plotting of the impact points, right? But then at the small level, you have all those other types, right? The release point, and I think we kind of have release point because in bomb mode you can like put the circle on a point on the ground, and then when your target goes over it, it turns green and you can hit the button, right? So that's kind of constantly computed release. And then we have constantly computed impact point, which is just the circle on the ground. But it's enormous, right? And the only ship that we have is I should do it this way though, because the camera. The ship we have is dropping huge bombs, right? So it should be a little bit more precise in where we actually want to do it. And then the ship itself should, by God, like I feel like the ship doesn't react fast enough. So the few times we've done testing in ammo, right? You cross over, the circle passes over the objective, you hit the button right where you think it's going to go, and it's like the ship goes and then it drops the bomb. You're like 200 meters beyond your release point by that point when the bomb drops. It's like, come the fuck on, man. Like it should be immediate. Like, so
or like a two-stage system. Like you have to engage your bombing module, because it's if you have to give out commands, open bomb bay doors. Think from like World War II era B-17s. There's
sure that would be fine, but when I pull that damn trigger, that bomb needs to go. Yeah. There needs to be
Either
no
that
delay.
Or that timing delay needs to be factored into the calculated
into the reticle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the computer needs to account for that. So it's but they one of the other things that I brought up is like, so we have to integrate my favorite topic, which is not my favorite topic, but reconnaissance. So the ability to take imagery of various sorts in game, export that to a planning tool in game, plot the targets you want to hit based on your reconnaissance, and then pre-program your guided munitions to hit those targets. And I kind of show what that looks like in my video from a B2's perspective, which is you kind of get like a roadway, and in that roadway there's a series of circles, and each of those circles is a where the aircraft is gonna, it's like the cone that the aircraft is gonna drop the munition in. So as you pass over the target, right, it's computing where it's going to release munitions. Each of those guided munitions then travels down to their individual target and destroys it. So with 5 bombs, in theory, if I fly over one of our little sexy ground targets, right, with 5 turrets, right, four on the corners and 1 in the middle, I should be able to fly over that really quick, take some in-game pictures, upload that into a table, right, in game, plot drop points, fly my Crusader over, drop those bombs, those 5 guided munitions drop down, strike each of those surface targets and destroy those turrets. I peel off and go back into orbit, and a dropship comes down and drops a platoon of infantry on the objective, and they take the target.
I can only
Right.
get so erect.
That's
You
the
need
way
to
that
stop right now.
you've yeah. Is that's reconnaissance, follow through, and then prepping the objective and then assault. Right?
Well,
All
they've always talked about it. That's the style of gameplay they want, the preparedness, preparation.
Yeah.
The ultimate game loop.
Planning, and
Yep.
doing things ahead of time, putting in the extra effort, grants you the rewards. Yeah.
Right. You don't have to use the table to plan and upload to your A2 or your A1. You don't have to do that. You can go drop the bombs manually and try to hit with a dumbfire or whatever. You can do that. But if you take the time, the extra hour it takes you to fly out, recon, fly back, and do all that,
And the risk.
you get and the risk of getting blown up if you're not careful, especially with master modes. You can't just burn across the objective at 500 freaking meters per second or whatever. You're going to be limited by atmospheric conditions and the maximum SEM speed you're allowed to do if you want shields.
Either doing it via a ship and alerting them to your presence and the fact that they're being monitored, or you stealthily, you do some stealth stuff like Nightcob has been talking about, and you insert a team stealthily who can get you that information. But each carries its own risk, and the stealth way would take you longer, but could get you intel without alerting the enemy you're coming. But you could, recon.
Laser guided munitions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about.
Yeah, get your BDA.
Painting the targets with a laser. You insert a ground team, that paints the target or provides you immediate up-to-date intel and, a laser painted target. Like, I'm down with that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Kel, what you're talking about would be for a fixed location, a fixed target, that.
Oh,
that
sure.
would be
Yeah.
phenomenal. But then, you've got ground vehicles in the AO, and you can just say, okay, they're in this area, bring in the A2 with a whole buttload of size 5s and just carpet bomb the whole place. Or, you bring in, you laser designate with your for your A1, and you use your team in order to save on munitions, have more precise targets, not hit the collateral stuff that maybe you don't want to hit. Because that's the other thing is if we're maybe it's a player built outpost and you don't want to level the whole dang thing, you don't want to miss, but you need to hit these.
I want their toys. Yeah.
I want their stuff. That's why we're I'm trying
I
to
want
get
their salvage.
Yeah.
A little more collateral damage, less salvage you might actually even take out of it too. Even if it's not just like fully loaded ships.
So
that would require a lot of interaction between systems in the game, though. So and it's it may or may not be easy to do. So I, from a programming perspective, I don't know how hard what I envision would be. Right?
I think it does. I think it's one of those things that would be worthwhile to have that kind of depth, because that kind of depth, along with the other systems that they're building, really creates a pretty phenomenal playground for the milsim people that otherwise might not be there. And I think that's a community that CIG would do well to tap into. Not only is order bring more people to game, more money, blah blah blah, but also that's a very dedicated community that is also really good at providing feedback, and constructive feedback. I mean, you look at Arma and Arma's development over the years because of the milsim community and
DCS.
And God, DCS times 1,000, even more so. But it's because of the way, how dedicated those people are to playing that play style, and I think it would really, if you got the right programmer, the right people at CIG who want to work on something like that, I think they could really make something interesting out of it that would take that sort of combined arms gameplay to another level besides just, oh, we have tanks and aircraft, and people on the ground, so we technically have combined arms. Well, yeah.
Yeah, no, there's integration that makes that combined arms work.
Hmm.
Salchi brought up a point in the chat. He said also a precision a targeting pod. So, the
Oh, like
the A
something that you equip on a ship? Is that what you mean?
yeah, the A1 is going to have missiles. You sacrifice a missile slot for a size 4 targeting pod that offers you the ability to on the fly reach out and touch, lays your own target and drop a precision bomb. So one of the things so he does DCS, and he helped me a lot on that video by providing me some secondary footage from DCS demonstrating the techniques I was talking about in the video. And one of the things in DCS is when he activates the targeting pod, one of his MFDs is showing real-time footage of the targeting pod where he's adjusting the camera to laze the target before he fires the munition. And he's
Hmm.
doing that on his own. And it's one of those things like, okay, so in the A1, I'm going to have a second crewman. And really, right now, his only job is to man that rear turret, maybe play with the shields if he's lucky, but he won't because I have it mapped to my stick and I can futz about with that with the push of a button, right? So, what is that dude doing? Well, he can be, in theory, if we could get that level of integration and ship systems integration going on, he could be lasing targets or, as we're approaching, looking at the objective and saying, oh, they've added something. There's now an anti-aircraft piece there. We want to drop a 6th bomb on that. And now he's lasing the target. He's getting coordinates. He's programming in so that when you drop, now 6 bombs drop. And that gives him an active role in the bombing process, not just the management of the ship, but of the process of bombing, right? And I think that would be nice as well. So,
Nightcob, you have anything else you want to add, bud?
No, he covered it all.
I meant to ask though, because we've been talking about bombing, but do you think that, and I know that you're an engineer and everything, but you are interested in the submarine equivalent, in game, and getting more stealth. But do you think that there is more that we need to add, kind of like how we've been talking about bombing, but as far as the use of torpedoes, and propelled munitions, because obviously, you can fire a torpedo at a ground target, and it essentially becomes a cruise missile, versus in space. But is there anything else that you think that we should have in game to further out that gameplay, to make it more than just missile operator mode? You know, something besides just big missiles.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know if I'd want it to be more like the real world equivalent of how we use torpedoes, either in the submarine force or, from, launch from surface ships and stuff like that. That gets into a whole new level of complexity and gameplay that, I'm not sure the systems are there for that. I like it. I actually like. They're already considering a missile rework, so I'm gonna wait patiently and see what their plans are for that.
Mm-hmm.
I just want an effective balance between torpedoes, missiles, countermeasures, the styles of countermeasures that are used, how your signature for the type of missile or torpedo fired weighs into it, so that there's a lot of choice and balance. That's what I care about for torpedoes and propelled munitions of that type. When it really boils down to it,
Mm-hmm.
as cool as it would be to, have more, like guided wire torpedoes. That's just a whole different style of gameplay that honestly, I don't need in the space game. I'm satisfied with more of
We
like
don't
in
need
the
to
air
go
style
full
combat.
silent hunter, just halfway
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
have to agree though. Yeah, there
I just
comes
want
a
the
point where
signature things to matter.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there comes a point where reality kind of sucks,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's not fun, right? It's hair raising, and some people might enjoy that. I think most people just want to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, we
That's
can
Go ahead.
I was just saying we can replicate what we do without the complexity of what we do and still keep it
Yeah.
fun, right? Planning a bombing run is a multi-hour endeavor, right? That is flight plan logging and geo-rectified targeting points. I'm not talking about any of this shit. I mean, you upload a picture, you put a dot on a map, upload it to your ship, and away you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Easy
Yeah.
peasy. It doesn't matter what way you approach the target. It doesn't matter, or maybe it does, but I don't know. Simple. Replicate the effort of planning to generate the fun of the game. And I think Night Cobb, you're kind of talking about the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do wonder because we as far as torpedoes, we have the size 9s and then size 5s and size 7s. The size 5s being on like the Gladiator and it's the Harbinger, right? That's the Vanguard with the size 5s.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you also have
Size
the
5s on the Gladiator too.
yeah, and then size 7s on the Ballista. It's size 7s
Yeah.
and size 5s,
Yeah.
or what are the ones that are on the side? The smaller ones? You guys remember?
I don't know. I've never.
I know
I know they had
the
the
big
size
ones
7s.
are.
I don't know
I
about
know the
anything
big
else.
ones are the size 7s, and then of course you've got size 9s on the Tally and the Eclipse. But then because we do know that munitions like the and weapon sizes, it isn't necessarily like a linear progression. It's more like
Yeah.
an almost like an
Geometric.
exponential curve.
Yeah.
As far as your going up in size and damage potential. And so it does make me very curious because like the Polaris is size 10 torpedoes, which is just another huge leap above the
It's
size
troll
9s that
cannon.
we have. Yeah, and there's what is it? I think it's 4 in the tubes plus 24 in reserve versus just 6 or 3 like on the ships we have now. And then the Javelin has size 12s, which is just nuts to think about.
Does it? Is
Yeah.
that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
that's
those
like
two
making
front launchers.
that's like making the Moab just like a joke at that point.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just they're if we hold to the exponential curve as far as damage potential, those size 10s not only as far as range, but then just the what the damage potential is on those things. It's just crazy to think about. But
Okay, now I'm a little pissed at the Javelin in the what's our event that we do? The Xena threat. Those
Yes.
douchebags never one shot an Idris in our favor.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No kidding.
Well, and those torpedo tubes don't function in at least in the PU yet, and so what is that going to be like with those next the capital class torpedoes, the size 10s, the size 12s versus just the large.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
I think I think there has. I think the obvious, in my mind, the obvious balance of that gameplay is those torpedoes are big and they're slow
mm-hmm.
and they're easily defeated by like defense turrets.
Yeah.
But I think they're supposed to be shielded too, right?
And the idea would be, you reserve those until your fighter contingent has taken out the defense weaponry, targeted the subcomponent level of the Idris and basically rendered it defenseless against those torpedoes. And that's when you slam them home. They're the kill shots.
I was almost wondering, like, maybe there's a munition that fighters deploy in order to, it's like a reverse chaff, a reverse flak, in order to screen for those torpedoes, so that way, you deploy this, and that way your anti-air or your PDCs can no longer target them, as they close, but you have to
you say
get it in the right spot.
That's not a bad idea, and really all you're doing is you're creating clutter, so that the system has a hard time. Differentiating.
It wouldn't be enough for the torpedo not to be able to continue to track a capital ship because you can't hide a capital ship, but it would be enough for the capital ship to not be able to track or not, maybe not be able to, but have much more differentiating between torpedo and something else, whether it's visual or signals based.
And I think those torpedoes are probably going to be shielded, which is going to make them a lot harder to deal with as well. But I think you're right. Yeah, probably having to deal with the point defense before you waste a 1 million credit torpedo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be a really calculated shot, but those are the sorts of things where I'm like, people always think of the javelin as, oh, I'm going to use it against other players, and I'm like, I bet you the UEE would pay you a hell of a bounty if you went out hunting Vandal with your javelin.
Oh yeah.
And you practiced that maneuver, and you took out a Vandal driller, and provided proof of the kill. Hey, we killed a driller in the Tiber system when we were out out raiding. I pay me however many million credits it is, because that's I totally see that PvE oriented gameplay being another way to get more use out of those capital ships versus just against other players. I think that the other players, it's a much more limited role versus, because Star Citizen at its core is going to be a PvE game with PvP in it, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And
I still wonder if that size 12 will
entities.
one-shot an Idris too.
Oh yeah, I mean it might not. We don't know how because we don't know how that scale, how steep that curve is.
Yeah.
Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But maybe you just have to be really good to land it against something with good PDCs. That's the
Or you close and dumbfire it.
Yeah, well, because that could be the role of the Polaris in that it's fast. You close really fast. And all shields forward. And release your torpedoes so that way they have a lot of velocity, and you don't have much time to react, and they might shoot down 2, but you launched 4, or there's 2 or 3 Polarises, and they can't defeat all of them. But yeah.
Ooh, that's that Battlestar Galactica style.
I mean,
gameplay.
I think the Corvette fleet's going to be a real problem for these Idris and Javelin players. They're like, it's gonna be a Javelin, it's gonna be great. Yeah, until until like 6 Polaris show up and just spank you. Because you're not going to have enough guns to keep up with them, and they're going to saturate you with size 10 missiles, torpedoes. I mean,
you better hope that you brought enough actual players and not just NPCs crewing your PDCs for you.
Yeah, I think Corvette fleets are going to be really strong in this game.
Speaking of Corvettes, so another little lore tidbit. If you look at the Polaris brochure, it does say that the Polaris is part of a line of Corvettes from Robert Space Industries. So I fully expect there to be more.
What is it? An older one? Is it considered an old one?
No, the Polaris is a new ship. It's from 2946.
Oh, okay. So it's new.
Yeah. So I did a whole bunch of lore reading on Robert Space Industries as part of a lore equals gameplay segment that I did on Tuesday, which will be going live on my YouTube tomorrow. And so the lore surrounding Robert Space Industries, largely supplanting Aegis as the Navy's primary military contractor for their capital ships, alongside Anvil as well, but not Anvil's a much newer company, so they don't have as many contracts. But it totally makes sense that given time, RSI is basically completely replacing Aegis at every class level, other than a handful of things that Anvil makes. And it's in the Polaris lore, it's in the Robert Space Industries corporate segments and the different jump points. So it's pretty interesting to think about. But I talked about the lore behind the leaked capital ships from the Squadron 42 leak.
I still need to see that video. Yeah, that looks cool.
It'll be up on my YouTube tomorrow. Before we transition to our last topic of conversation, which is going to be the master modes, I wanted to give you guys each a moment if you wanted to plug your stuff and talk about what you do and where you do it. I already dropped a link in the chat to both of your YouTubes and Nightcob your Twitch. Um, so that way, if everybody, if you're in chat and you're watching and hanging out with us live, please give these guys a like, subscribe, follow, all that stuff. Do the same for me. We really appreciate it. But yeah, I wanted to give you guys the time to do that before we get into master modes, because I think master modes is going to be interesting.
I'll let Atira go first.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm Tyrkel. You can find me at YouTube/Tyrkel, all one word. Of course, I'm also on Twitch at Atira_Kel. And my focus has been deep dives into the history of how kind of humanity, because I do include things like Russians, Chinese, European nations, and America, have conducted military operations in the past and currently. And then I try to extrapolate where we should go for Star Citizen, which, so if I have strong opinions on bombing, it's because, right, I did a video on bombing and I talked and, dove into tons and tons of mechanics of how we do bombing in real life, and then how we can replicate that and still keep fun in Star Citizen. And I try and accomplish that with each of my videos. We also just do a lot of science fiction and fantasy gaming, some survival stuff that are on the channel. Just the Ammo Crew, Salty in the chat's one of them. Velocity Raptor's another. We just love hanging out, playing video games, and having a good time. And then we post some of that on the channel.
Oh, we've got some of your org mates in here. I didn't realize. I knew you'd mentioned it, but I didn't realize who it was. Thanks for joining us, guys. I really appreciate it. I know I've probably talked with a couple of you guys before, but yeah, the more the merrier. And yeah, glad to have you guys hanging out and chatting with us.
I made a huge mistake in letting you go first. I don't do a whole lot really. No, so every once in a while I casually stream Star Citizen on Twitch and hope that people come by and talk to me about Star Citizen. I'm thinking about doing some DCS actually here. You brought it up earlier. I've recently started playing DCS, trying to learn how to fly my F-18. So I might start streaming that here in the near future. So if you want to come give me a hard time about how bad of a pilot I am with the F-18 and how many times I struggle to land on an aircraft carrier, by all means come by and say hi and rag on me a little bit, or give me some really good pointers because I could use them. Definitely could use them. I'm a little bit better pilot in Star Citizen. So I like to hang out, play Star Citizen, talk about the game. I love talking about the game and its development. And I'm also a really big cinephile, so if you really want to distract me from whatever I'm doing in game, regardless of what game that is, just bring up movies.
Ah, okay, cool.
So we have a pilot in training in Ammo who flies a lot of DCS. If you want to take some lessons, I'm sure he'd be happy to. And Salty's good too. He's not a trained pilot, but Juro is a trained pilot if you want to sit down with him sometime in the Discord and learn the ins and outs of atmospheric flight.
I'm down.
In DCS. They both fly a lot of DCS.
For sure.
Very cool. And I just dropped a link to my Discord in the chat. If you are not already in my Discord, I encourage you to join us because we got a number of different places within Discord for interesting conversation, including a section for this podcast as well as the Pathfinders podcast, where you can talk with each of us and any other guest hosts that we have, as well as other members of the Discord, about the different episodes and things that we talked about. You can also submit a question or a suggestion. So if you want to suggest something for us to talk about, relevant to, preferably relevant to Star Citizen, we are open to suggestions. It helps make our lives easier because that way we don't have to do all the heavy lifting. But if you think there's something that you're like, hey, I'd love to hear these guys, banter about, this or that, we have a space for that. And then lots of other interesting things in there. So join my Discord and come hang out with us in there as well in between episodes. But our last topic of the night is the master modes. Um, and to start that out, um, one thing that they didn't cover and was a little bit, I don't want to say concerning to me, but it was, it's like, I wonder how this is going to work. Is and this is the first question. We got a couple more that I wanted to bring up, but we're so used to, granted it doesn't always work, but being able to quantum travel as part of a group, you're linked quantum travel. And Night Cop, how do you think that the master modes are going to impact traveling together as a group?
I think it really boils down, so what I got out of that segment is, they've got SEM obviously, and then they've got the quantum mode, and within quantum mode, you've got two different modes of travel, and one is the standard that we've already become accustomed to: long distance travel. You align to a point, an arbitrary marker, and then you travel to that planet from somewhere in the solar system, and then you've got this quantum boost. And I'm very curious about quantum boost for that short uh, group travel as well, because it looks like a skill check the way they have it presented.
Oh, don't talk about skills now.
What? Yeah, not that kind of skill check. Like
that's
your own skill
that's
check.
another episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah, that's a whole different can of worms conversation that I'm really anxious to create some controversy over at some point in time. It'll be great. But if it's a group tandem skill check, that makes it even more challenging and potentially more
Yeah.
exciting. I would like that. I would like that. If that's the idea of, all right, we're going to give you this new form of quantum travel. It's quantum boost, and the team that excels at that, at doing that skill check together, and all arriving, in formation, ready to deliver a precise and swift attack on a target, and then get in, get out. That just created the whole, you know, uh, harrying tactics of a strike group, of light fighters or something like that around a system, and that's just cool gameplay at that point in time.
Not
You
only
know,
on the attack, but also you have completed the attack, and then everybody getting out of there. You
Exactly,
know,
exactly.
um,
I
the
always think of Star Wars Rebels, right? Or
I love
or
that show.
or Clone Wars
Underrated.
Same.
when the ships come in, right? And then they're
Yeah.
all in formation and they come out. And then when they depart, they're just, it's always like diagonal off the screen, right off the screen, but they're all in the roughly a formation and off they go into hyperspace. And yeah, I wonder, can you run into each other in this new quantum boost?
That'd be something.
So like if you're fighting, right? Because we saw him kind of do it,
Ooh,
and that the ship's going up and down, and
yeah, because
and
you do
he's
have to
fighting it with
steer.
the thing,
Yeah,
right? Because it's there's instability there. So if it just so happens that your boy goes up and you go down and you guys don't correct,
Yep.
do you hit? Right? Do you
yeah.
explode mid go? I I think you're right. It has the potential for some great cinematics, some great deadly tactics, popping in and popping out. But it is group skill challenge. I hadn't even thought about it from that perspective. That's going to be interesting.
Well, because the thing that I think about is, especially if you've got um a mixed squadron, and
Mm.
there being
Yeah.
variations in speeds,
You're always going to have a mixed squadron. Yeah.
yeah, and you have to, you know, time, time getting, into quantum boost, right? You have to try and match speeds so that you don't pass up somebody with your ship that can go considerably faster, and then you get there first, and then you're, oh great, it's just me, you know, and then your buddies
here's
arrive,
the
and it's just
here's
a,
the
yeah.
Idris, and you pop out right in front of him.
Get them, boys. Where are all
You're
my
like,
friends?
ah.
Because you talk about how, in that Cobb, you illustrated it really well. You talk about how it could go really well, or it could go really badly, and there's multiple things that you have to consider in order to do it right, so that way it doesn't go really badly. And
Yep.
it's, do you because that brings more player agency and choice into it. It seems like, where, okay, do you use the traditional quantum mode where everybody has to spool up and take their time, you know, and do all that, and potentially lose the element of surprise, any number of things, to use the computer aided way of doing it? Or do you do like you were talking about, where, hey, we've been practicing this maneuver together, we think we can accomplish this skill check. It's I've done the math, and it's a 96.999% continuing chance that
Oh
blah
gosh.
blah blah. But because like, I really think it's not just as cool as it would look. Having everybody get there right at about the same time, around the same position, in especially if you have a set formation, these lead elements farther forward over here, in order to immediately set up like a flanking maneuver, anything like that.
Well, I
It
mean,
could
it's as
be.
simple as like, if you come in, let's say it's two Gladiuses and two or four Gladiuses and two uh, Eclipses,
Hmm.
coming in hot on a target, and you want the Gladius out in front to basically deal with the fighters, and not only that, but you don't want the slower Eclipses getting, clocked in the first few seconds of battle at the front of the
Hmm.
formation. That's a big
Yeah.
timing thing. That's all about timing and position. Gladius
Yeah.
have to come out first, and they have to come out ahead of those guys so that they clear the airspace, and the Eclipse can run in and deliver the torpedoes, and then they're out.
Yeah.
And
Well,
if you
you,
don't
you
do
don't
that
want
right,
your eclipse to overshoot. You want them to
exactly.
come out behind of where the gladiuses came out. You know, that's a there's a lot of tactical there's a lot of potential tactical advantages to that, and that's why I really liked it. There's so many people who were screaming about different things and having their emotional reactions, and all I could think of, there's a lot of ways that you could make this really cool and do some really cool stuff with it, not only for just straight up machinima purposes, but you from a tactical strategic standpoint, if you do it right, based off what they're showing us, it gives you a lot more flexibility than just the traditional QT. But if you just want to use the traditional QT, you can totally do that. If you want to, take your time and be exact and not have to do, oh, I'm going to QT over here. I think it's even though it was something that it seemed like they were making for Squadron, I felt like it was much more applicable to the PU immediately than the um, than the the SCM portion, if that makes sense.
Mm. So my first thought is, so I always think about this from a logistics perspective, because that's kind of the most
Logistics wins
important thing.
wars.
Yeah, and I think about it from like, okay, so how quickly can I jump into quantum boost versus how quickly does a spool up require? Is the
Yeah.
spool up for boost faster than the spool up for a full quantum jump? And they said something like you can only go 50,000, right?
I
But
think they were talking about like a ballpark as far as the range.
sure, right. So like your maximum quantum boost before you overheat and pull out is
Hmm.
gonna be somewhere in that range.
With
So
varying
then,
speeds within that sort of range, I guess.
right.
Yeah.
So then my immediate question is, how do I know where I'm going if I'm trying to get to a resupply point that's 50,000 kilometers away from the battle space? Am I going to immediately see that, or are they going to give us beacons at some point that we can drop outside of our Starfarer so that I can always see,
Hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
I'm going to
You
want
always know where
to,
that is on the star map, and it also gives you an AR marker. Yeah.
Yeah, you
regardless
need
of
a
whether
bullseye point
QD
as
is
a
on.
reference.
Yeah, regardless of whether QD is on, right? I need to see that at all times, because from a pilot perspective, if I'm going to withdraw to refuel, right? Or let's say I've got a four fighters, 2 flights each. I'm going to withdraw 2 of them to refuel and then bring them back, and then the other 2 are just going to like suffer and try to stay alive, and then they're going to repeat, right? Uh,
Rochambeau.
yeah, and you're going to rotate forces for resupply. And let's say there's more, right? And you can actually pull some back. They're not going to want to just like break contact, fly away, spool up, fuck around, try to find the beacon. They're going to want to know, like, as they're flying, I know that it's roughly here, so they can immediately put their ship there, activate quantum boost, and just zoom off in that direction. So that's a thing. And then I hope phase 0, everybody quantum boosts at the same speed. Right? Phase 0, let's just all kind of go at the same speed. And then you can do a phase 1 where we start to play with, like, okay, maybe the warden can go the full 50K and he's faster because he's got a size 2.
Or he's
But
more fuel efficient at it.
or he's
Kind of
more
like what
fuel
they did
efficient at
with
it.
the combat rebalance. What was that in 2020, where they brought everything back to same shield, within the size classes, do the same thing for quantum, and then
Well, just start it there. I don't
yeah,
mean
no, that's what I
pure
mean. Start
quantum.
it there, and
I just
then
mean quantum boost start. Don't screw around with normal quantum.
uh-huh.
Just quantum boost. Start from the baseline. Let us get used to this idea that, like you said, we can all kind of quantum boost towards the same objective at the same speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then integrate into that mechanics like maybe I'm more fuel efficient or go faster or slower, and my friend has to make adjustments on their quantum boost so that our speeds are the same, and it's a thought process so that then we can quantum boost at the same time or at the same speed. Because one of the things that irritates me, and I always thought this was a default, but I think it was a default for a while and then they moved away from it, is that you would always travel at the rate of the slowest person in your quantum formation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it used to be at, like, for one patch, and then it went away. And now when I take off into Vanguard, I'm like a million miles an hour, and my friends are much slower. Right. And so you don't get that cool kind of dual quantum state drive unless you have drives with matching speeds. So, but yeah, I would prefer not to start with us being all wonky speeds. Everybody just, going everywhere. Be nice to start kind of on a level playing field and then tweak it. So
I'm with that. Everything should start at a baseline and then they can tune.
yeah, and then give us the ability to tune, and I think that's the important thing. So, like, yeah, you can tune me up so that my arrow goes like a million miles a second in quantum, but if I'm flying with my Vanguard buddy who's slower, I may want to dial that back so we show up at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and let me manually do it. So, anyway, that's all I got on that. I think it's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be fine.
At its base level, even if there's a lot of growing pains with it, just being able to travel to any point, but your mission marker, and being able to say, "There's my mission marker. I'm just going to go straight to it." And as long as you can point at it, be able to go straight towards it without having to, oh, I have to set my I'm going to spool in a line towards here and then turn off my QT drive right now. Oh, dang it, I overshot by 600 kilometers. Will
Well,
be
they've
such a
already prepped us for this for some missions.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So, like, the Black
Yeah.
Kite and the Pride of Arliss,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't quantum drive to those, but they're 300 kilometers away.
Yeah.
So when they bring out this quantum drive, you just spool up, quantum drive for 2 seconds. You're within 20 kilometers, and then you fly the rest of the way in. But
Yeah.
now you got a slow boat out there.
You have to slow boat it, or you have to time it, and it's just it's a pain in the butt. And it at a bare minimum, it's a huge quality of life thing, a huge quality of life change. But at the most, it could be all sorts of
It's a skill.
interesting skill based benefits. And if you're not skilled, ouch.
Here's another question. What about asteroids? In the current quantum drive, when you go into quantum in an asteroid field, you just pass through everything that's in your way.
I think the asteroids are going to, as far as asteroid fields and belts will be um, it will be based off of more off of density, um, because I don't think they're going to bother with, okay, you specifically would have hit this one asteroid in the field, but it's
But
more,
that would be so
yeah,
irritating and fun all at
it
the same time.
it would be. But I think given that the way that they've described the different asteroid belts and fields, like in the lore on the star map, I think that it,
Mm.
given like the air and halo just completely pulls you out, you cannot quantum through it. I wonder if they will differentiate based off of the density, whether you can quantum through it or not.
We quantum through it
Because
all the time.
yeah, no, I mean like going forward, not saying right now, but
So you think
you
when at game launch we're going to be stopped dead at the Aaron Halo and have to slow boat it through the Halo and then quantum the
yes,
rest of the
you're
way?
gonna have to go through the air and halo gates. I don't think they've
Yeah, I was gonna say they have the
abandoned
gate.
that. Yeah,
All right.
I don't think that they have abandoned that premise, but it'll be really interesting to me, if they do keep that, but how will the lore for the air and halo makes it seem like it's more unique compared to other asteroid fields, where like
Mm,
I forget which, and maybe it's both of them, but I know one of the ones in Nyx is specifically said to be not nearly as dense or something along that verbiage, and so I wonder if that will have an impact on your ability to travel through it. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Because
Yeah,
they were pretty
Someone in
specific about the air and
someone
halo,
in
but
chat said they have gates,
yeah.
maybe.
yeah, the air and halo gates. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Juro says it's 1.3 gigameters wide right now, which
Uh,
would slow
Jesus.
boating slow boating that would be
Well, so the gate basically is like a giant structure wall through the middle of it, and all the asteroids on either side just go dink to dink 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 to dink dink, and you can, you quantum to the gate, and then you could probably QT fast it or the boost through it, but
mm.
you'd have
Ooh, that'd be
to
sick.
stop, you know. So
So I
before we
mean, why
continue, I just want
yeah.
to say, Phased Kitten just subscribed at tier 1 and is my first subscriber on Twitch. So I want to give a
Yeah, face
round of
kitten.
applause. Thank you, Phased Kitten, for
Yeah,
the
go
sub. I
face
really
kitten.
appreciate it. And just a reminder, any and all monetization from my Twitch and my YouTube goes to stackup.org. So if you want to support stackup.org and you don't want to see commercials, you can subscribe. If you any support that you give to me goes directly to stackup.org. So, when the statement comes out for monetization, whenever it does, from Twitch, I will be posting in my Discord and on my Twitter, hey, I received this much money in monetization from Twitch, and then here's the screenshot of the statement. Here's the screenshot of the statement of me donating it to stackup.org. And I forgot to mention it. So obviously I'm small potatoes, because I just made affiliate, and so I won't make a lot of money on monetization, but I am going to match what I receive from monetization subs, everything, um, this first month up to $20. So whatever the difference is, between my monetization for this first period when I do my first donation, I will I will cover the difference between $20 and donate that to stackup.org. So if we exceed that, then I'll just up that goal. And I haven't figured out how to put that goal in Twitch so that everybody knows. But we're just going to make it a competition. If you guys start subbing, and doing all that, not including donations, because Cromtac already donated $50, and I do okay, but I'm not rich. Um, so I just want to throw that out there. We're throwing down the gauntlet. That's part of what this podcast is all about, is raising money for a good charity for veterans and military members. And so, um, and if you hate commercials, you can hate commercials and donate to charity at the same time. But yeah. Um, sorry, that tangent, but it got all excited
No, it's
because all of a
worthwhile
sudden it
plug.
said
Oh
Great
yeah,
tiered
series.
sub, and I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what? Whoa, I have a sub. Yeah, well, let's move on to the next question because I think I think we pretty well covered that. And um, the other interesting thing about the Air and Halo is it's one of those things if it's been on and off the progress tracker many times, like as many times as salvage, and it's not on there right now. And so what's the holdup? We're getting pyro. They're working on asteroid facilities, for like pyro and Nix going forward. So where is the Air and Halo? Because it was on the progress tracker. They talked about working on it. I think it was back in 2020, or maybe it was early 2021, and we haven't heard hide nor hair since. I did a segment on it for Pathfinder's podcast. Um, so the other question I wanted to ask you guys, and this is a to me this falls well under the logistics conversation. Um, is how does resource management and engineering gameplay impact the various modes of quantum travel based off what you guys have heard and read so far?
I'm not sure that it will. I mean, for
Well,
resource management, it might burn quantum fuel, which
Mm-hmm.
might reduce your overall long distance quantum travel. But I mean, engineering, yeah, okay. If you get out of your cone, you might cause damage to the ship. The engineer has to repair, like, because because they're gonna force you to kind of stay on a path, and it'll be interesting to see like what happens if you veer off the path and try and bank or dive or climb. Like, does that put too much stress on the hull?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I take it back. Maybe there will be some
on the
interesting
quantum drive.
pieces. Yeah, does it stress out the quantum drive? Yeah, and then
Ooh,
the engineer
that
has to get in there and like do some repairs or something like that.
that's actually a
Yeah.
good point. I hadn't thought about if you are, yeah, the cost benefit aspect versus risk reward of, hey, if you're, you know going the because it should be faster to just turn, engage, go versus turning, spooling, and aligning and then going. But by doing it that way and using quantum boost, you know, not only could it, burn more quantum fuel, it's less fuel efficient, but it also puts more stress on your quantum drive. That's a I hadn't thought about that as a way to balance it. You use it, you know, maybe not sparingly, but you almost like with binding, like you're trying to, keep it in the green, not let it get up into the red, and so you use it, and then let it rest or something. I don't know how that would
Well,
work as
it's
a
designed to
gameplay
push you in a
mechanics, but
straight line. So if your ship starts to veer because you fail your skill check,
mm-hmm.
maybe now it puts undue
Oh,
stress on the hull and on the system, and then that
yeah,
rapidly accelerates damage to your systems.
mm-hmm.
So if you fail the skill check, you have a consequence of, our favorite fault, which is what is it? It's what's the fault you always get when you afterburn too long? You get a gosh, when you afterburn into the red.
Oh,
When your thrusters are firing weird. I can't remember what it's called on the screen.
the no, I know because you get it when they get
Torque
damaged and you're
imbalance,
missing.
major
There you
major
go.
torque
Oh yeah,
imbalance. There
torque
it
Yeah,
imbalance. Yeah.
is. So now you have like a quantum torque imbalance where like it's all red and like your ship just doesn't fly correctly in quantum because you've overstressed you failed your skill check, and now you have some type of massive fault that just ruins your life.
I'm
So
amazed that I haven't seen somebody who's like a wickedly good dogfighter and their character's name is Major Torque Imbalance.
well, now you just gave that name away. You should have created the
Yeah, you should
account.
have kept that.
But I could
You
never
should
be
have kept
Major
that.
Torque Imbalance. I'm a terrible dogfighter.
I'm always major torque imbalance. I'm in a constant state of major torque.
I'm a pretty accomplished dropship pilot, but that's about it.
That's what I like though about the new quantum modes and how that factors in. Um, that's what I want to see. I want to see some ships have better reactors that deal well with quantum boost,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and maybe
that's
they're
another
not
good way to
really
balance it.
great. Yeah. Well, to draw my real world example, um, submarines, we use nuclear reactors, and they are like Porsche of nuclear reactors. They're very, very good at changes in power that are rapid.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want 100% power, optimal speed, you want to go fast, you want to go fast now, they're good for that.
Oh, I had no
Whereas
idea.
civilian reactors are only good for getting up to max output and staying there. They do not change power quickly.
Hmm.
So,
You
you
learn
know,
something new every day.
Every
yeah.
day.
That's super
But that,
cool. I had that, but you bring up a really good point because, the, and I'm going to get on my lore soapbox again, but the lore for our power plants is that they are reactors and that they have mentioned that there are there's um, there's fusion reactors, there's fission reactors, there's antimatter reactors, and if you create differentiation within the power plant, it's not just hey, this is a size 3, it's a size 3 of this type of reactor that's better for one thing or the other. So your size, you choose one if you're you know uh, bebopping about in short distances, but you're choosing another if you're going longer distances,
And some might
via
be
the
better for
QT mode.
exploration vessels. Yeah.
Hmm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because
And
it
you think
is,
about it like,
you have your QT drive, but you also have the power plant, and the power plant is what the amount of power that you give to your QT drive is what allows the QT drive, what changes the field that the QT drive generates. That's the way it was explained by Chris Roberts, and I in the link that I put in our our little document. And so, like you're talking about, if the power plant is able to change the amount of power on the fly directed towards the QT drive, that changes that field. It could be much more, it's a two-part relationship instead of just the QT drive. It's your combination of the two, you could
yeah.
create more combinations.
Well, and that's where I think the engineer becomes part of the heavy part of the gameplay. Is there's going to become a job where people are in the weeds of this QT drive with this ship and these subcomponents of the QD drive make it optimal for maybe this type of tasking and suboptimal for this. And that's the choice that you have to make. It's a mining vessel. It's going to be really efficient on the really long hauls. And if you have a good engineer, maybe you can squeeze a little bit of quantum boost performance when you really need it and you get interdicted by pirates. And it's all about how quickly can you get into quantum boost and make a couple short jumps to get you out of harm's way or something along those lines. And your engineer is going to be the person that really dictates how good, how well your ship can do that in those situations and how well it can handle that kind of strain. Or if it's not good at handling the strain associated with those tasks and you risk breaking your quantum drive, um, or damaging your power plant as a result of putting the ship through that kind of stress when it was never made for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, doing
Then
you equipped it for this, but then you try to use it for this for whatever reason, maybe something, something's not going the way you planned, and yeah, that dramatically increases your risk of risk of damage or injury to your ship. That's a really
Well,
good.
that'll give new meaning to the industrial, civilian, military, and
Mhm.
performance.
yeah,
Right.
and that's
I
what I'm
mean,
hoping for with that.
yeah.
Creating roles
Beyond
within
just
components
shielding
like we
and
do have
power
ships.
output,
Yeah.
it'll provide things like efficiency in powering quantum or efficiency in powering normal
Capacitors.
SEM flight.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that'd be interesting. And the military should be kind of like a balanced kind of perspective, but maybe civilian. I don't know. Yeah, because you're right.
I
'Cause
would
like
like military
exploration
to maybe
vessels
have
should.
more because we have subcomponents within the components. I I would like for
Yeah.
military to like be to perform, reasonably well, but to have more redundant subcomponents, because it
Mm,
needs to take damage, and stress, um, you know, and have redundancy so it keeps on going in a fight versus a
I
civilian
agree
one,
with
maybe
you.
not so
yeah.
much.
I agree with you, but I think the balance of that needs to be the components and the subcomponents.
Hmm.
Longevity needs to be much lower. Like they're going to require
Yeah,
more
burnout. Yeah.
frequent maintenance. Yeah,
Yep.
because
Hmm.
that's true in real life.
Yeah.
High
Yeah.
performing, state of the
Constant.
art stuff needs to
Yeah.
be maintained.
It's almost like
You-
that's why you have a job, huh?
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. This is my job.
So you're saying that in the 30th century, you still want 30th century night cop to still have a job? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't want to be him in the 30th century. I,
But you
I
want to
I
be
get enough of
captain.
that in this century, and I don't need to do that job. I want to be the Avenger One style space mercenary pirate pilot kind of guy. I get enough of the other stuff at work. I don't need to.
Mm,
I don't need to do it more. But I would like that style of engineering gameplay to be available because I think it is deep and engaging for people
Hmm.
that don't want to be strictly combat oriented. And I think that I happen to know people that have said when they saw the most recent thing with master modes and resource management and optimizing subcomponents to get the best out of a ship, they were like, "Oh, that's my jam. That's what I want to do for people. I want to be the engineer that does that for them on their ship." And I think that's an awesome thing, to catch that niche and bring that style of gameplay in. I'm excited about it. I want to recruit a really good engineer for my Perseus. Be like
Hmm.
so that I have the most optimized, well maintained Perseus in the verse. You know.
yeah.
I
Someone in the
like it.
chat said Vanguard should be a great ship for pilots and a nightmare for hangar crews. I think that depends on components, though. So if you put all military components in there, and they are high performance, high maintenance components, right? Then yes, it's going to be a nightmare. But if you equip it with like a mix of industrial, civilian, stuff that is more like your Honda, so you have super low maintenance, but you're not going to jump off the line every time. Then maybe it's a lot better on the maintenance. So, but yeah, I see what you're saying there, Ghost. Associated changes in flight performance. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So if you equip a
A
civilian power plant, your power transfer rates for things like getting your shields charged back up and recharging weapons when you put stuff in weapons and you're adjusting capacitor gameplay should be vastly different.
a mil spec Vanguard hoplite for the UE Marines would be that hangar, nightmare. Just because
Should be a
that,
hangar queen.
yeah,
Just
that
live
Marine
there.
pilots would just be,
Yeah.
wearing those things out.
And I like that too for separating the style of gameplay in terms of money sinks. Like if you're an
Hmm.
industrialist and you're mining, you want, that the way you drive them to industrial components is these things are long lasting and therefore while you're out mining, these are not money sinks that cut into your profits by having to consistently change out your components. So yeah, maybe you don't have the higher paying missions or maybe you're not doing the really fancy mining and stuff like that, but you also don't pay as much in the money sinks that maybe a combat pilot who's getting these like, you know, higher end contracts to go out and protect, civilians in a high pirate area. Well, even if they're succeeding in defeating the pirates, they're like constantly eating into whatever their profits are because, like, well, I got to buy a new power plant. It's been, a month using this one in game time and it's trash. It's too hard to maintain. Time for a new one. And, that's a money sink for them that's appropriate and kind of keeps up that struggle.
I dig it.
That's a
I like all that.
Yeah, especially with the, differing money sinks. One person would be sinking a lot of money into the maintenance, of this aspect of their ship or this aspect of their gameplay, whereas another person is going to be sinking a lot of their money into a completely different aspect. And you're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I hardly spend anything on maintenance, but I'm just constantly shelling out credits for, you know, hangar fees or increased fuel costs or
Paying the
the
NPCs to fix your ship.
the refinery fees and taxes, what have you.
Drake plus military components equals scrap cloud. Yes, your components overpowered your ship hull and it fell apart. It is now being salvaged.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. We've got other good questions in here. I'm trying to pick out one or two more because I want to cut it off at about the 3-hour mark because we've been going for a while. Let's see. How do you guys? So we've been talking about space a lot, and being that I am a career dropship pilot, how do you guys think that this is going to impact atmospheric flight as far as the SCM mode? Because before I'm going to preface this, I did rewatch the Need for Multiple Speeds video. I also watched the interview that Space Tomato did with Avenger 1 and oh crap, I forget the other guy.
Black Maze.
Yes, there we go. Thank you. So
Yeah.
there's SCM, which is essentially what we have now, but with a speed cap. And then there's QCM, which removes the speed cap, but within QCM, the way I understood it and the way it sounds like multiple other people have understood it is that you don't have to travel with your quantum drive in QCM, but it removes the speed cap so that, with your thrusters, you can go very fast, or you can do quantum boost or traditional quantum travel. So it sounds like there's 4 modes of travel, 3 within QCM, 1 within SCM. Am I explaining that okay?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, actually.
So within the atmospheric flight for SCM and then the non-bound QCM mode, how do you think that's going to impact atmospheric flight? What changes are you anticipating, regarding what they've told us?
You want to go first, Tira, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll formulate.
So I think with regards to atmospheric flight, I think even in I'll just one thing you said in QCM, it's not that it removes the speed cap; it just brings it back to what we were used to, essentially, for space. 1,200, 1,300.
What we have now, but for thrusters, yeah. But giving you quantum boost in the in between, yeah.
Exactly. So for atmospheric flight, I think what it changes is, it changes the decision of maybe you get an extra 100 or 200, meters per second in QCM and atmospheric flight, and the decision becomes, is it worth it based on where you are and what you're doing? Because you're vulnerable in that state, and I don't think you're going to be able to boost in atmosphere directly into space. So, there's a really hard decision that you're going to have to make when you come into atmosphere. Yeah. Oh yeah. Think about Orson. Man, that could be a pirate's dream. The upper atmosphere of Orson, if they don't change that.
Yeah.
When you're in that in between, you're out of the where you can't fire guns. Armistice zone.
Armistice zone.
Out of the armistice zone, but you're well away from orbit.
Oh, yeah. And you're going fast using traditional engines, but you can't form a QT bubble. But because you have all that power diverted from your shields and weapons, and in order to
engage either.
Yeah, exactly. You're very vulnerable while flying with thrusters.
Why'd you hit my point, man? That's a good point.
Oh, okay. Well,
I think that'd be cool, though.
Yeah.
Can you imagine pirates coming out of the clouds and attacking you while you're just trying to get out of or into atmosphere of Orson and interdicting you there where you're vulnerable?
Not just Orson. That's any gas giant because we are supposed to have fuel depots in atmosphere. In the sort of low orbit of gas giants where you can go and get fuel. Like that's, Starfarers are supposed to be able to scoop it themselves, but they can also, go to these fuel stations, get fuel, and then take it other places. They're the also the fuel haulers. And so if you're going down there to get fuel because it's cheaper there versus at another station somewhere else where it got hauled to, but then you're making the long haul back out of Atmo, and this is in a gas giant, in a a less than secure system like that could be a really great point of vulnerability for pirates.
Yeah. And not only that, but it could build that really great tense gameplay when you're leaving an area. You got a fresh haul of cargo, and you're coming away from Orison, and all of a
Sweaty
sudden
hands.
you're looking at traffic. You are looking at the incoming and outgoing traffic, and somebody in your ship's probably playing the analyzation game, like, there's like a bunch of light fighters and you
Hmm.
know, a couple other, you see a Legionnaire come in, and you're gonna be like, I have concerns, guys. You know,
Yeah.
and those will make for some really great tense moments for the haulers, and I think that's cool gameplay for them.
Hmm.
I know a lot of people are really really scared about how this affects the industrial game loops and potential for interdiction. And atmospheric flight is kind of the other great equalizer. If you take the mantis out of the equation on how you interdict in space, which I'm sure you remember, Tree, that was one of the big topics of discussion, is because Avenger 1 kind of approaches it from the angle of there's always a mantis for the most part. And, that's definitely one way to look at it for space interdiction, because that's essentially what you need uh, to ensure interdiction and ensure that quantuming away is not an option. But the other one is to do piracy in atmosphere, and to find them when they're vulnerable. And you start thinking about where the game is eventually headed when you can start targeting subcomponents and killing somebody's thrusters, or at least crippling their maneuvering thrusters or main thrusters in atmosphere
That's a super
before they can
cool
reach
scenario to
QT.
think about because you
Like,
You
you
better
run
be
the
able to
risk
catch
of,
them.
well, you run the risk of disabling them too much that they crash
Drop.
hard,
Yeah.
and then what you were trying to pirate, um it ends up in a lot of pieces. You don't get as much out of it, or you don't get anything at all,
yeah,
or or you're hoping to force them to land on the ground, make a little bit of a rough landing, or you catch them while they're vulnerable so they're barely able to make it out of atmosphere, but then they don't have, that they're, that they can't get into quantum. You're that's a timing thing where you're using skill and choice and what information you've gathered in order to, hey, we're going to get at them when they're vulnerable, but it also puts what we're trying to get at risk. And so
yep.
that's a really, it's a really good point, dude. I had not thought about that at all.
But so that's what I think is going to be the cool thing with regards to atmospheric flight with
Hmm.
QCM and versus SCM, because you're going to have to make that choice. Is making myself even more vulnerable in that state where I'm removed from one of those modes of travel, one of those four you spoke of, quantum, or really two, excuse me. I don't have quantum boost and I don't have standard quantum, so I can just go
Hmm.
a little bit faster maybe. That's it, but I do it at the expense of weapons and shields and countermeasures.
Yeah.
Like
Did they say
that's
countermeasures as well?
they
Yeah, I'm
did,
pretty sure. Yeah.
they
You
did.
Maybe too much, in my
That's what I
opinion.
was thinking too. Like, why wouldn't your countermeasures work? I could see not having the power for weapons and shields.
But
And
countermeasures is a self-contained thing that just drops out of your ship.
yeah, it's a poof,
And
it's not.
also because they'll sit at SCM and just hit you with missiles
Mhm.
when you cross that threshold, and you'll just, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Try to
Yeah,
outrun? Yeah.
I think there has to be I think that has to kind of factor into the missile rework. I think that's why they know they need to readjust the entire system. If they
Mhm.
kill the countermeasures on uh, QCM and in that mode, like it kind of just it does bring a whole different style of gameplay into it that feels arbitrary more so than most. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people are talking about this whole arbitrary speed limit and stuff like that, and why do I suddenly lose my weapons and shields just because I want to go fast? I'll give
Eh,
the real world example of the submarine real quick.
yeah, and it's not arbitrary. That's been part of the design the entire time.
Yeah, and
That's
it
not new
honestly it
information
makes
at all.
exactly, and it makes sense to me from a reactor perspective.
Hmm.
The reactor's capable of a certain amount of output. You have engines, you have an electric plant, that powers various things within the submarine. There's such a thing as reaching a point where if I devote too much to electrical power, then I lose some propulsion capabilities in terms of speed. And there can be a trade off.
Hmm.
Like I can reduce electrical loading to gain more propulsion capabilities.
Aha.
Don't get me
See
wrong, in
that?
an optimized, idealistic world, I have my 100% output should be able to do all the things. But ultimately, when you take damage or if you have components fail, something along those lines, then you could be limited one way or the other, and you could buy yourself more propulsion by curing some electrical loads. So for me, it's
Hmm.
always an idea of, okay, well, it makes sense, at least in the fundamental basic elements like, okay, do I want to go faster? Then I'll kill electrical power to my weapons and shields, or whatever energy I had in a capacitor. So I don't have to continuously feed with power
Hmm.
and shift it all to propulsion. I go faster. Makes
Yeah.
sense to me. I'm down with that. But you're right.
That
Countermeasures doesn't really make sense from that standpoint
I
because they
wonder
don't
if
require
maybe they
power.
meant to say that countermeasures don't work as soon as you go into quantum. I mean,
which makes
not
sense.
that you know,
That would make
which
sense.
makes sense, but at the same time, does it need to be said? Like, who? Well,
No. Yeah. Sorry, your
you're
missile
outrunning
doesn't
the
fly
missile. Does it matter?
point to the speed of light. Your missile doesn't move that fast.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that's the countermeasures part does seem a bit short sighted, and I'm hoping that they do sort of walk back on that, or at least provide more information on it. Because yeah, that one's kind of weird. Um,
Me personally, I like the idea, and this is if CIG is still in the chat. I thought I saw somebody in there.
oh yeah,
I like the idea
Jaden,
that
C Daddy CIG goes by Jaden Cottrell as well. He and I have been Star Citizen friends for like 5+ years. We've been in multiple orgs together, and so I made him a mod in my Discord and on my Twitch. He is the guy that gave Paul his Redeemer.
oh nice.
Yeah. So I knew
Nice.
about that long before Paul received it and had to keep my mouth shut. But
Paul
yeah,
deserves that ship.
he does. He really does. But yeah,
Certain amount of
CIDCHG
hate.
is a super good dude. And he's not going to give you, behind the scenes information. He's really good about keeping secrets and stuff. But
Oh no. Yeah, yeah.
he's a good friend, and I'm glad to have him a part of my Discord and as a moderator. So yeah, that's who that is.
Well,
He's
all
part
I
of
would
the
say is
oh gosh, dang it, I forgot what team he's part of. He's not like a developer as far as makes ships or anything. He's part of like the not the community team, maybe it's the platform team or something. I forget.
Hmm.
gotcha. Well, I just threw it out there. Maybe one of the other developers will watch the YouTube too. I don't know.
Hmm.
We'll see. But I like the idea, and they kind of have it already. I think it just needs to be dressed up and improved upon. I mean, the idea for me for missiles would be heat versus electromagnetic signature versus cross section, and you have that already. But it just needs to be fine tuned to the point where it's like, okay, ship's running away and they're getting ready to engage quantum. So they go into quantum mode. The quantum drive comes up, their EM signature spikes. Now is the
Yeah.
time that they're much more vulnerable to EM missiles, so they better have some chaff or noise or whatever equivalent that you want to make it that's
Yeah,
effective
your
against EM
QCM
missiles.
mode should generate way more heat, I would imagine.
But you would need to be
Well,
able to. You'd need to be able to track the variations in their emissions output in real time
Hmm.
to know when to use a missile like that.
we
And
have that, don't we?
That's some
I
cool
don't
skill
know,
based
I
gameplay.
don't, I don't know that it's within your eyesight at any given time based on where MFDs are.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it is. I use
Is
it all
it?
the time. Yeah.
In
Because,
every ship?
I mean, if you rearrange your MFDs, yeah,
So I mean,
On
I usually have my self status and my target status, but
should be
target
on your
status,
target status.
does
they're
it
also
show?
doing an MFD
Okay.
rework, and they're doing the HUD AR rework. So
Can you get a missile locked on and fired and strike in the time it takes a light to spool and like at a random jump point and then jump off?
Well, well, I guess that's going to depend too, how
and that
quickly
could be
people
a
come in
balance
and out of
point too.
QCM modes, because that's
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? So like, if it takes 3 or 4 seconds for somebody to spool, to go from SEM to QCM, and what I would expect is the signature spike is immediate,
Hmm.
and say EM. You just
Right.
powered on a really big EM signature, and the drive's coming up. Your ship's making the transition. That's 4 seconds of, okay, now's a good time. And maybe it's the skill based of like, okay, I'm seeing that they're getting ready to disengage. I'm prepping a missile.
Yeah.
They look like they're
One
getting ready to try and run,
and the
and I
lead up to
happen to have
that
EM
could
missiles
be
on
that
board.
the thrusters, when you go into QCM mode and you're not using your quantum drive yet, whether it's boost or regular, but you're putting you're no longer putting a power to your shields and your weapons, but instead it's going towards your thrusters, which are on the outside of the ship. Your heat signature should go through the roof, so that
Yeah, that too.
you go through a phase of, okay, you're in normal SCM mode. You can you do have EM, you do have heat, but they're not as high up as as others. So maybe that's when um, you're better off using your cross section type missiles. But then if somebody goes into QCM and tries to go to max um,
Velocity.
max velocity at
Yeah.
thrusters, it
Yeah.
generates a huge plume of heat, while they're trying to escape. But then, if they transition to QT and dial back the thrusters, then it's a huge plume of your EM spectrum. And so if you can maybe you have like a something on the HUD, if they could make it so that it's just a bar, that changes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
as
me,
you
because I
transition.
think you say it's. I think what you're saying is it's little numbers, and
It is.
I can't. My eyes won't track that. But if it's a bar and I can see
Yeah.
like the bars jump, then that's a better visual for me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
To see that, that's kind of what I was talking about, like a visual cue that's not just a bunch of spooling numbers on the
Oh
bottom.
gosh, yeah.
Yeah,
Everybody's leaning
that I
it.
can't track.
Yeah, everybody over 40 is
Yeah,
trying to see
shut
it.
up. I want to hear. Don't you dare.
Go get your readers, Kel.
The so bringing it back to atmospheric flight, I think approach to targets is going to shift vastly.
That too.
Can
Right.
you elaborate?
So, sure. I have 4 minutes. Um,
It's not a hard line.
shit.
Yeah.
I
I just realized what time it was. Yeah.
No. So as air defense systems increasing capability, right? Because the range at which these things can engage is kind of arbitrary. It's probably a little bit further, actually. They should be able to a little bit further out. It's going to force you to slow roll it in. I think it's going to force you to, like right now, I can zip in a light fighter to go do a bunker. If there are turrets on the ground, I can quickly identify a small terrain feature, burn over there at like 300-400 SCM, hard brake, drop down, right? Put a terrain feature. If your max speed is 2 something, and it's only going to go down from there, because those are the numbers they were throwing out for things like the Arrow and the
Gladius.
Gladius,
Yeah.
right? Which are your fast your fast ships. So now your larger ships, I mean, you're going to have to approach a ground objective a lot more cautiously than just like bum rushing the objective and hoping there's not, 4 size 4 turrets staring at you on the ground. So especially and especially for light fighters, I mean, you could try and do a flyover, and if you're not being careful, those guns will just knock you right out of the sky.
So
So
for reference, 200 meters per second is about 450 miles per hour, and 300 meters per second is 670 miles per hour. So I mean, it's a pretty substantial drop in speed from what we're used to, but it's still
yeah,
going fast. Like if you're flying in atmosphere, flying around terrain,
sure,
you're
but
still cooking.
the turrets will track you a lot easier at 400 miles
Oh
per
yeah,
hour than they will at 6, right? And
yeah, for sure.
your max speed limitation there in SCM are really going. You're going to have to. I just think you're going to have to approach targets much more carefully as you
Hmm.
come in, and you're going to have to maybe do a loop around the target, look for terrain, see if see if there are turrets on the ground that are going to shoot at you, and then assess how you're going to approach the objective, because you're going to have a lot. You're not going to have as much wiggle room to escape quickly than that you do now, right? Because now you can go in with your speed limiter, taking you up to 6, 7, 800 SCM. If you get in trouble, you just burn out and run. You're not going to have that convenience now. You're going to have to be very deliberate about how you approach, I think. Especially when it's players on the ground and you're coming after players.
It's really true.
That is going
You're
to
much more susceptible to a railgun now.
exponentially more difficult,
Ooh, yeah.
because you're just not going to. I mean, you don't have the speed to just rapidly shift position. I mean, you do, right? You could still jink, you can still jump back and forth, but it's gonna you're still a lot slower. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents. I think ground approach is going to be a lot more difficult. And I saw your comment that you're not going to burn into the ground at QCM speeds. You're right, but you might approach the target at that speed and then slam on your space brake.
It's true.
I
Yeah.
mean, you may
Well,
approach to the 200 meter mark, which is well within size 4 cannon range, and then
so
slam on your space brake.
but that does bring up an interesting point, because we do have the within atmosphere, you do have drag, we do have an atmospheric flight model. And
Yes.
so you can go into QCM, and but not fly with QT boost.
Right.
And it allows you to go faster than SCM, but it will probably still have a gradient as far as how fast you can go based off of
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
atmosphere and
Air
atmospheric
density
drag.
will matter. Yeah.
So maybe at within low altitude, your QCM thruster max speed is 50, maybe 100% more than what your SCM max speed would be. But
I'm not
you can
even
go
sure it'll be
faster.
that. I'm not
Yeah,
even
no,
sure it'll be that.
I'm
Maybe a
just
total
spitballing. Like
waste.
say your max SCM speed is 250, in low atmosphere, and so in QCM you can get like an addition if it's an additional say 50%, of 250, it's 125, so maybe it's or less, I don't know, however they end up scaling it, maybe it can give you a higher speed because you are able to devote more power to thrusters to go
But
faster.
is it worth the risk of not having shields?
Exactly. Especially, you're going faster because that's
And not
the,
having
the,
boost.
yeah, and the complaint that all the, the low flyers were making is like, oh, well, now we can't fly fast. No, you can still fly fast. Your shields are just going to be, if you make a mistake, it's going to be that much more deadly. Like to me, it makes
It's
that
ins-
better
yeah.
for them.
Their complaint isn't so much the shields, because if you hit something like at the speeds that they're low flying at, they're pretty much dead usually in an arrow anyway. It's
Yeah.
that they don't have boost to correct for mistakes.
Can
Like,
you
you can make a
not
mistake
boost
and you can
in?
boost yourself out of your trouble. You can't boost in QCM.
Okay, so you can boost in SCM, but you can't boost in QCM. Okay, I got
Yeah, that's what the racers are really upset about.
you. Okay, so
Is
they can't
it's not because they have
main.
the speeds available to them. It's that they've lost the boost function
So
while
there's another
achieving those
reason to
speeds.
run performance or sport components.
Yeah, I could see that.
Maybe the one reason you would ever run a performance load of components is because it offers you between the quantum drive, the power plant, it offers you the ability for a slight boost. And depending on the quality and then what you're paying, right? It
Yeah.
offers that. And then you have, because in the same way that military technology is reasonably high performance for a high maintenance cost, racing and
The
performance components are the same way.
Well, and I
So
do think that the SCM will scale significantly in atmospheres. Because like if you're flying and your max SCM is 250 in atmosphere in Hurston, on a moon, you're dramatically reducing your drag, and so I can still see the SCM scaling appropriately,
I
substantially
hope
more.
so.
Yeah,
I hope so.
because
But
I think that would be the
I
way that.
feel like their base speed is gonna be that 250 is in space. I would almost guarantee they're basing that
You think
on
so?
space. Yes. So
Okay,
you in 0G can go 250. And
so
from there,
you
atmosphere
think?
will either slow you down or allow
Ah,
you to go your normal speed. So if you're on Yala, it's 250. If you're on Hurston, maybe it's 200. If
okay,
you're in some other high density planet that I can't think of off the top of my head because it's late, maybe it's 100,
yeah, okay.
right? And
That
then
was a subtle cue.
no, it was not. I was not my cue.
Well,
But
this
I'm
is my
just
last question because we just hit the 3 hour mark, but it's a you do bring up a good point though, because while this is something that they've been developing and balancing for Squadron 42, I don't think hardly any atmospheric flight occurs in Squadron 42. And
I think
that's
it's
just
just
my
landing
Ooh,
because like one of those
I
shots
would
that they
bet it
showed a
does.
couple citizen cons was like the dude comes in, he lands on the freaking
that's on a
base.
moon that has almost no atmosphere though.
Was it?
Yeah,
I,
I
that's
think they're
the
gonna
moon
have
is
some
called
atmospheric.
okay, I
very
didn't know what
very
the atmospheric situation was.
I think it's probably going to be minimal. And this is just me spitballing, but the majority of what they're tuning for is space-based combat, because that's maybe it isn't all of Squadron 42, but it's probably the vast majority of it is Squadron 42
Mm.
is space-based dogfighting combat. And so this might be something where the the space-based combat will come in a better place, and then atmospheric flight is going to require a lot more work and input on the part of the players in the community.
Might.
Might be. And drag may have to be just something that they adjust
Mm-hmm.
so that it's not miserable for atmospheric
Yeah,
flight.
yeah, because we don't
Uh,
want to fly around like it's World War II, World War One, and we're flying
oh,
biplanes and yeah,
sometimes you get into some of these planets in my Carrack and I'm going like maxed out 100 SCM and I'm just screaming at my computer. I'm like, come on, man, just
yeah.
let me get out of the atmosphere. I'm just flying straight up and it's like, bro, I
Mm-hmm.
could barely get there, and you're just dying as you try and slow boat it out. But yeah, I think 250 will be this, or that SEM speed will be in space.
Yeah,
So I don't,
it'll be
I
interesting to see what they do for the Atmo for sure.
but that
Because
makes that approach even worse though
yeah,
for ground target. Because now if you're in a high density planet and there are turrets and you're coming in at 150 to 200,
oof,
right? That's slow. That's
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, meters per second, miles per hour, it's still very, very fast. But we're used to flying at much higher speed. So for us, that's going to just be molasses.
mm-hmm.
And I think I don't think it'll be a rude awakening for us for, a patch or two, and then we'll get used to it and it'll be fine.
Yep. Um, Night Cobb, Kel, do you guys have any closing comments? Anything else you want to add? Because I think that's a good place place to wrap it up for the evening. We've been going hard for 3 hours now. Made a lot of really good points. Had a lot of good, interesting conversation. Again, everybody in chat who's still with us and has been with us, I want to really say that I really appreciate you joining us and coming and
4
hanging
more
out. And I
hours.
hope you've enjoyed it. No,
4 more hours.
No, my voice can't take it.
Shut up,
Actually.
Velocity. You're done. Go home.
Yeah. I don't sound
No.
like this normally. For those, this is my final comment. I don't sound like this normally. So, yeah, just got over a cold and the voice has been stressed to the max.
Yeah.
No,
No,
no to 4 more hours.
I would just say that thanks for everybody that showed up. Thanks for the
Yeah.
donation to stackup.org. Let your friends know that we're doing this. We'll put out information when we're going to do it, and it's again once a month or so when we get enough information to really talk about in-depth military stuff, because they don't always come out with a lot of military focused stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. And tell your
follow-
friends that are veterans, please.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Tell them
if you-
to come on by, like and subscribe to everybody's content. Join the Discord, because if you do have veteran and military friends in the community, we'd love to have them on the show in the future, especially if there's something in particular they want to talk about, or we'd like to talk about with them, based, particularly if they have something that they're passionate about. Like with Night Cobb, and he that power plants are his thing. That's an IRL thing that he knows about.
I've learned so much.
Yeah. We are hoping.
I learned a lot too today, by the way.
Well,
As I
we
sat here listening to Terror Talk for a long periods of time, I'm like, I'm gonna have to look up some acronyms when we get done with the podcast.
yeah, I'm gonna start a little running list on a piece of paper down below, of new acronyms, and we are hoping, we haven't committed to it, but we are hoping to do a Veterans Day special. Veterans Day is November 11th, and so whether it occurs on the 11th or Saturday the 12th, we haven't fully committed to it, but that's something that our goal for the next episode is that. And we do have some interesting topics already lined out for episode number 2 and number 3. We just haven't set hard dates. So if you want to be kept up to date on when we're going to be doing our next podcast, follow the three of us on Twitter. I'm twitter.com/tree0311-sc. Guys, if you want to drop your Twitters, because they'll retweet the announcements that I post.
At Atira_Kel.
Yeah, and I'm at Nightcom. I'll put it in the chat.
And then join my Discord. All the announcements come out in my Discord. And I also have all sorts of channels that in there that give you alerts to all sorts of information. The discussion for both this podcast, the Pathfinders podcast, will continue in there, and we just talk about everything Star Citizen as well. So please join us and come hang out, not just during the show. But again, thanks so much. Thank you to what was it? What was the name? Something Kitten.
Phase Kitten. Phase Kitten.
Phase Kitten.
Phase Kitten.
sub.
Thank you for the sub, and for being. Thanks for being my first.
You popped his cherry.
Yep, Cromtac was my first donation. Phase Kitten is my first sub. We're growing, we're moving, and we're shaking, and I'm looking forward to the next episode already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you guys,
Cool.
if you guys don't have anything else to add, I will sign us off for the evening. Thanks again, and let's see what's going to be our shtick. Maybe we'll just go with the Bill and Ted, and be excellent to each other. Have a good night.
I'm down with be excellent to each other.
Yes, be excellent to
You
each
gonna
other.
rate somebody?
Be excellent to each other and party on. Ooh, yeah, the rate. Hold on, I have to figure out how to do that, because we do have 9 viewers. I've done it before.
10.
We got 10. We got 10. I think I have to pull up.
So Marcus the Way is streaming Star Citizen with only 11. We could double his numbers.
Okay, hold on. I think I have to do this from Twitch itself on the browser. I think. I did this before.
Are you? I don't think we're using OBS Velocity.
Oh no, we are using OBS.
Are we using OBS? So
Yeah.
he says /raid, then the channel in OBS.
Oh wait, here we go. I've got the button. It's because I can do that on Twitch itself, and that way I can search. Oh, and we are 2 followers away. It looks like from the follower goal of 90. So if you're not already following, please give me a follow. I'd really appreciate it. As well as on YouTube at Tree0311. Like and subscribe. So what was the name of the guy you wanted to raid? Guy, gal, person?
Marcus the Way. He's got 11.
Mar-
He's streaming Star Citizen.
MARC or K?
MARCUS the Way. I'm checking right now to make sure. Just
Marcus
to see
the Way. All right. We are going to raid Marcus the Way in 3, 2, 1. Seven viewers are ready to raid.
Yeah, it's 23 now. We just
Bombs
doubled
away
his
with the
count.
viewers. Raid now.
Yeah, he's
Okay,
got
so
23 now. There you go.
It automatically
off?
does. And stop stream.